He naturally had more confidence in his words and actions. Wasn't it just a face-to-face transaction? A mere blood alliance wouldn't dare to pull any trick. Do you believe that they wouldn't be wiped out just by raising their hands? After discussing the location of the transaction, Blood Red War Flag had a smirk on its face. It then sent an OK emoticon to Wuji and said, "Done. Thanks for the trouble." Seeing Blood Red War Flag's message, Wuji replied politely, then closed the conversation window and said, "Let's go." "Leave? Where are we going?" Everyone was confused. "To Yu Huiqing, of course." Wuji smiled and said, "We've waited for so long, it's time for us to get to work." As he spoke, Wuji took out a pile of scrolls and handed them to everyone. "Damn, how do you have so many teleportation scrolls?" Seeing the scrolls in Wuji's hands, everyone could not help but be shocked. It was fine if he only brought one of these scrolls normally, but Wuji had brought 4 when he came. Now, he had brought out a pile of scrolls. "How many did this guy buy?" Wuji said calmly. "When I teleported to the city of Nifas, I saw that there were so many people in the city of Nifas, so I bought all the teleportation scrolls in the auction house." "Awesome." Hearing this, everyone gave him a thumbs up. As expected of a ruthless character who cheated people all year round. He understood the principle of being prepared. Seeing that there were so many enemies, he had already prepared a way out for himself. A true expert was someone who could advance and retreat at the same time. After sighing in admiration, everyone tore open the teleportation scrolls and stepped through the teleportation gate. Everyone once again returned to the familiar land of Yu Huiqing. Purchasing the mining area was an urgent matter. Absent Sun was not short of money and, of course, he did not lack a teleportation scroll. At almost the same time, Absent Sun and Xuanzhen's group arrived at the Yu Huiqing Tavern. Inside the tavern, Blood Red War Flag had been waiting for a long time. The players of Yu Huiqing all knew that Wang Yu and Evildoers Run Wild had an ambiguous relationship. Today, Blood Red Alliance had snatched away Evildoers Run Wild's territory. At this time, seeing Xuanzhen's group and Blood Red War Flag appear in the tavern at the same time, everyone was shocked and left their seat. What a joke! These two guilds were the strongest existences in Yu Huiqing. The last player who came here to watch the show had his guild wiped out. With the previous example, everyone naturally would not be so blind. When Blood Red War Flag saw Absent Sun and Xuanzhen's group enter, they shouted and called out, "Come, come, come, over here." Seeing this, Xuanzhen's group sat down without saying a word. Wang Yu, Wuji, and Evildoers Run Wild sat at Blood Red War Flag's table. The others sat not far away, blocking the way out of the tavern. When Absent Sun saw Wang Yu's group sit down without a word, a trace of displeasure flashed across his face. However, he quickly adjusted his mood and asked, "Blood Red War Flag?" "That's me." Blood Red War Flag replied, "You must be Absent Sunday." "Yes." Absent Sun glanced at Wang Yu's group of 3 and asked straightforwardly, "We are making a deal. Why are these 3 sitting here?" "Ha!" Before Blood Red War Flag could reply, Wuji laughed out loud and said, "Our guild also wants to buy Boss Blood Red's mine. What a coincidence that we ran into each other." Absent Sun's expression changed. "Blood Red War Flag, what do you mean by this? Do you think you can get us to increase the price just like that?" "How can you speak like that?" Wuji laughed. "Since we are here to buy the mining area, of course it goes to the highest bidder. If you are poor, don't try to be rich." "Humph, did I say that to you?" Hearing Wuji's words, Absent Sun's expression suddenly darkened. "Blood Red War Flag, I have already told you. I am informing you now, not bargaining. I have no choice." Blood Red War Flag spread its hands helplessly. "They want to buy, and I can't afford to offend them." "Oh!" Hearing Blood Red War Flag say this, Absent Sun could not help but look up and down at Wang Yu's group. Then he sneered and asked, "Which guild are you from? How dare you steal my business? Do you know who I am?" Chapter 1642. Oh, hearing Absent Sun's words, Blood Red War Flag could not help but mourn for him for half a minute. Blood Red War Flag knew better than anyone what kind of people Chuanjin was. This group of people had always been bold, and they were amenable to coaxing but not coercion. If they spoke nicely, they might give you a good attitude, but with such an arrogant attitude, wasn't that asking for death? In the end, he was still a youngster, not knowing his limits. Blood Red War Flag had asked Chuanjin the same question back then. However, what surprised Blood Red War Flag was that in the face of Absent Sun's provocation, Wang Yu and the others did not look angry at all. Moreover, Wu Ji, who had always been unforgiving with his words, did not retort on the spot. Instead, he looked at Absent Sun and said with a smile, "We are a small guild, not worth mentioning. May I know which guild you belong to? Why are you speaking so arrogantly?" Absent Sun was also honest. When Wuji said that his guild was not worth mentioning, this kid really believed it. He then looked at Wuji with disdain and said, "Dark Alliance. Have you heard of them? Sounds familiar. I think I've heard of them somewhere before." Wuji rubbed his chin, his eyes looking up, looking as if he was thinking. At this time, Blood Red War Flag hurriedly came over and introduced, "It's the guild I just told you about, the one that swallowed up to move unhindered in one fell swoop. It can now be said to be the strongest guild in the entire server." Seeing Blood Red War Flag introduce their guild like this, Absent Sun was quite satisfied, nodding his head in satisfaction and even revealing a proud smile on his face. Hiss! Hearing Blood Red War Flag's words, Wuji suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air exaggeratedly. He looked at Absent Sun with a surprised expression and asked, "Is that the Dark Alliance that is purchasing mining areas?" Seeing Wuji's surprised look, Blood Red War Flag's forehead was full of black lines, secretly cursing, "Damn, it was clearly you who lured him here, and yet you look so surprised. It's a waste of talent not to become an actor." "That's right. It's our guild." Wuji's exaggerated expression once again made Absent Sun feel refreshed, and he very decisively revealed his identity. "Then how much are you offering?" Just as Absent Sun finished speaking, Wuji came over and asked. Wuji's question directly caused Absent Sun to stare blankly. However, Wuji's performance just now had left a good impression on Absent Sun, so he no longer put on a straight face and calmly said, 500,000. 500,000? Wuji pretended to be surprised. "Is it that cheap?" "Of course." Absent Sun had a smug look on his face. "Then how about I give you 1,000,000 for the mine?" Wuji turned and asked Blood Red War Flag. As he spoke, Wuji waved his hand and took out a large jewelry box. With a plop, he threw it on the table. The jewel box glittered with golden light, radiating light in all directions, directly shocking Absent Sunday. In the setting of Rebirth, when gold coins exceeded 1,000,000, the container would become a gorgeous jewel box. There was no other reason than to highlight the nobility and make the tycoon look more impressive. 1,000,000 gold coins was not a small amount, and the number of players in the game who could casually take out 1,000,000 gold coins could be counted on one hand. Even the Dark Alliance purchased the mine with a loan from the system. As for ordinary players, they had never even seen so much money. After all, most players only played the game as a sideline, barely enough to support their families. And if the gold coins on the table were converted to RMB, that would be 10,000,000. Not to mention supporting a family, even Uncle Nyo would be rich. This, looking at the treasure box on the table, Blood Red War Flag had a troubled expression. At the side, Absent Sun said anxiously, "Why are you so insensible?" Wuji raised his eyebrows and said, "This mine belongs to whoever has the money. I don't have anything else, but I have money. Right now, my price is double yours. How about it, Blood Red War Flag? Don't you think you should sell this mine to me?" At this point, Wuji turned his head and asked Blood Red War Flag. "This is not a matter of money." Blood-red war flag waved his hands in embarrassment, not knowing what to do. Absent Sun could not help but say, "This is a matter of the guild." "A matter of the guild?" Wuji muttered doubtfully, then took out 2 more treasure boxes and threw them on the table. He then asked Blood-red war flag, "Is this enough this time?" "This." Blood-red war flag saw the treasure boxes on the table, licked his lips, turned his head and looked at Absent Sun. "Brother Dark, what do you think?" "I think." Absent Sun was also speechless. He could see that the guy in front of him was a hothead. He did not have anything, but he did not lack money. If Wuji had not taken out so much money, Absent Sun would definitely have threatened him again. But seeing Wuji casually take out 3 treasure boxes, Absent Sun felt a little guilty. This was a tycoon. Why did the Dark Alliance come all the way here to buy a mine? Wasn't it to make money? Therefore, anyone could be offended except the rich. As the saying goes, money is the best weapon. Just a moment ago, he was insufferably arrogant, but now he was stuttering a little. What a joke! If he really offended such a tycoon, how would he survive in the future? After being stunned for a long time, Absent Sun slowly came to his senses. After thinking for a moment, he asked respectfully, "Friend, I know you are very rich, but this is not how you should spend your money." "Is that so?" Wuji asked curiously. "Then how do you say I should spend it?" "It's very simple," Absent Sun said. "You can cooperate with the Dark Alliance." "Why?" Wuji had a look of reluctance. Absent Sun said proudly, "Just because we, the Dark Alliance, can buy the mine for 500,000, while you have to use 3 million. Oh, hearing Absent Sun say this, Wuji thought for a moment and said, "What you said seems to make some sense, but what benefits do I get?" "Of course there are benefits." Absent Sun continued to bluff. "Managing the mine is not a carefree job. We, the Dark Alliance, also do business. As long as you are willing to invest, we can give you shares. When the time comes, you don't have to worry about anything. You just have to count the money." Saying this, Absent Sun gave himself a thumbs up for his eloquence. Although the Black Dragon Triad was not a small guild, everyone knew that the Wei Nation was a small country with few people. Their resources were also forcibly occupied. Under such circumstances, the Black Dragon Triad did not have any surplus food. Otherwise, they would not have taken such a big risk to snatch the mine. From his words, it was not difficult to see how excited Absent Sun was right now. "Good news." Very quickly, the Black Dragon King replied in a very calm tone, "Tell me, what is the good news?" "I met a rich man from the country of Huaxia. He is also purchasing mining areas," Absent Sun said. "Snatching territory with us, what kind of good news is that?" The Black Dragon King did not understand. "No, it's not like that," Absent Sun hurriedly explained. "Just now, under my persuasion, he intends to cooperate with our Dark Alliance." "Cooperate with us? How do we cooperate?" The Black Dragon King's tone was still calm, not at all agitated by Absent Sun's words. "That is, he will pay, and we will give him shares, and so on and so forth." Absent Sun was very pleased with himself as he sent the set of words he had used to trick Wuji to the Black Dragon King. Absent Sun had originally thought that the Black Dragon King would be gratified by his wisdom, but the Black Dragon King's reply was still as indifferent as before. "Be careful when you do things, there are swindlers everywhere these days. Have you asked his name?" This, Absent Sun froze for a moment and asked Wuji, "May I know your esteemed name?" "Trying to get my personal information, do you want to kill me?" Wuji sneered. "No. I don't mean that," Absent Sun said. "I'm just asking." "I know you wouldn't dare." Wuji curled his lips. "My name is Wuji." Saying this, he also sent a friend request to Absent Sunday. He said his name is Wuji. After confirming that there was no mistake, Absent Sun casually sent Wuji's name card over. "Wuji?" The Black Dragon King looked at Wuji's name card and hesitated for a long time before saying, This should be a nameless person, taking this opportunity to deliberately show off in front of you. Although Chuanzhen's group had caused the Black Dragon Gang to lose chicken feathers and duck blood, and even lost 2 main cities, the Black Dragon King actually didn't know who had caused him to suffer so miserably. After all, there was a language barrier, and Wuji wasn't in the mood to introduce himself to this old thing, so it was reasonable that the Black Dragon King hadn't heard of Wuji's name. However, the Black Dragon King was an old fox after all, casually guessing that Wuji's purpose was to deliberately get close to Absent Sunday deliberately. Absent Sun saw the message and couldn't help but quiver, hurriedly replying, "Is there a trap?" "There shouldn't be," the Black Dragon King said. "He's just a businessman, nothing more. He wants you to go and beg him, so he can take the initiative so that he can better negotiate the conditions. If he came to us, wouldn't he be in a passive position?" Wow. Really sinister enough. Absent Sun was dumbfounded. As a relatively straightforward person, he really couldn't understand the Black Dragon King, this old fox's twists and turns. When Absent Sun was dumbfounded, the Black Dragon King continued, "If you don't believe me, just wait and see. He will definitely be very unreasonable and ask me to go see him." Sure enough, just as the Black Dragon King sent the message, he heard Wuji say, "How did your discussion with your boss go? When will he come over? I'm very busy." Boss really has a godlike foresight. Seeing that Wuji's reaction was exactly the same as what the Black Dragon King had said, Absent Sun was full of admiration. Humph! Seeing Absent Sun's message, the Black Dragon King snorted. "Playing this game with me, he's still very inexperienced. Tell him to come see me if he wants to discuss business. I'm also very busy. He will definitely come." Yes. Absent Sun very obediently conveyed the Black Dragon King's words to Wuji. Just as the Black Dragon King expected, after hearing Absent Sun's reply, Wuji's complexion slightly changed. After thinking for a long time, he reluctantly asked Absent Sun, "All right, where is he?" "Dark Moon City. After we finish dealing with Yu Huiqing, I'll bring you there." Seeing Wuji's appearance, Absent Sun's face revealed an imperceptible smile. It was clear that he was saying, in the end, a little fox is a little fox, far inferior to an old fox. In the Chuanzhen Guild channel, everyone was in an uproar. F***CK. Old dog Wuji, didn't you say that the Black Dragon King, that old fox, wouldn't be easily fooled? Why is it so easy for him to meet us? Hee hee. Wuji laughed mischievously. "I've already fought with him, that old fox is still no good." Chapter 1644. Wuji had already made arrangements for the blood-red war flag. There would naturally be no problems with the acquisition of the mining area. Once they handed over the money, they withdrew their troop. The mining area in the blood-red war flag's hands would be occupied by the players of the Dark Alliance in minutes. After doing all this, Absent Sun did not stop to rest. He immediately led Chuanzhen and the rest out of the Yu Huiqing bar. Dark Moon City was considered the territory of the Dark Faction, and was quite far from Yu Huiqing. However, Absent Sun had helped the Dark Alliance pull in a large financial backer. Although the Dark Dragon King had put on airs and invited Chuanzhen and the rest to meet him, it was still a business discussion. It was enough to suppress the other party's aura. They could not afford to slight the other party. Otherwise, with Wuji's 3 million gold coins in one go, it would seem petty to let the other party sit on an airship for a few hours. Absent Sun gritted his teeth and bought a few scrolls from the auction house. With a flash of blue light, Chuanzhen and the rest arrived at Dark Moon City under Absent Sun's lead. The craftsmanship of the game Rebirth was quite exquisite. The 300 main cities of the continent of the brave could be said to have their own characteristic. There were basically no repetitive scenes. However, this Dark Moon City looked somewhat similar to Yu Huiqing's. The biggest difference was that the sun hung on the horizon of Yu Huiqing's, while the moon hung on the horizon of Dark Moon City. In comparison, as a main city of the Dark Faction, Dark Moon City should have been evil, but it had a somewhat poetic feel to it. After all, seeing the moon was either homesickness or nostalgia. As for seeing the sunset, other than a love at dusk, Chuanjin and the rest could not think of anything good. However, they were not here to admire the scenery. Getting down to business was the most important thing. After sighing for a moment, the group of people from the Quanzhen sect followed Absent Sun through many turns and arrived in front of a tavern. Seeing the bar, Wuji could not help but smile. As expected, working with smart people, regardless of whether they were friend or foe, would always make you feel comfortable. There was a huge difference between the game world and reality. Whether it was an ambush or a sneak attack, it was much more convenient than the real world. Therefore, most of the time, except for some unspeakable transactions, everyone would look for a place that had nothing to do with each other. The tavern was the most common place. It had to be said that although the Black Dragon King was not a local player, he was still very sensible. Since Chuanjin's group had come all the way here, he was not unreasonable enough to ask Chuanjin's group to go to his guild's encampment to discuss business. Of course, even if the Dark Dragon King really asked Chuanjin to go to the base of the Dark Alliance, Wuji would not go. He would definitely raise his own opinion. After all, these guys from Chuanjin didn't come here with good intentions. It was really inconvenient to do things in someone else's territory. Just as Wuji was sighing with emotion, Absent Sun pushed open the tavern's door, pointed inside, and respectfully said, "Boss Wuji, please." And Chuanjin's group nodded, and then walked into the tavern with their heads held high. Inside the tavern, the Black Dragon King had already finished clearing the area. He was now sitting in the center of the tavern, looking like the godfather of a gang. Beside the Black Dragon King were a few fully armed players. The players had serious expressions on their faces, not saying a word. It was not difficult to see that this was a group of experts who were not weak from the glow of the equipment on them. Chuanjin's group did not stand on ceremony. They walked in front of the Black Dragon King's table, pulled out their seats, and sat down. The Black Dragon King's subordinates were dumbfounded. Although the Black Dragon King was a little displeased, he did not show it. What an arrogant guy! What kind of place is this? Is it a place where anyone can sit? At this moment, Absent Sun hurriedly walked in, pointed at Wuji, and introduced him to the Black Dragon King. "Boss, this is the rich guy I mentioned, Wuji. You are Wuji." When the Black Dragon King heard this, he looked up and down at Wuji and said, "Why do I feel that you look familiar?" Of course he looked familiar. Previously, the Black Dragon King had been tricked by Wuji, and the two of them had met once. Although it had been a long time, and the Black Dragon King's impression of Wuji had faded, he still had some impression of this face. "He said he recognized you, and that you look familiar," Bao San calmly translated. "It's right that you look familiar," Wuji said with a smile. "I'm really afraid that you won't remember who it was that beat you up." "You are." When he heard Wuji's words, the Black Dragon King was shocked, and a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. "We met at Siema Tai," Wuji said calmly. "It's you." Siema Tai had been snatched away by Chuanjin only 2 months ago. When Wuji said this, the Black Dragon King instantly remembered who the person in front of him was. When he looked to the side, as expected, the tall and burly Grandmaster of Combat beside Wuji was still as eye-catching as ever. After all, the Black Dragon King had been through a lot. Although he was shocked, he quickly calmed down and asked expressionlessly, "It's you. Why are you looking for me?" "Pa!" Just as the Black Dragon King finished speaking, Lao Wang suddenly stood up, grabbed the bench behind him, and swung it, smashing it heavily on the head of a Dark Alliance player beside him. The player let out a dull grunt and was directly smashed onto the table. Hiss! When Lao Wang attacked, the originally calm Black Dragon King was scared out of his wits. He could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The other people at the table also trembled in fear from the sudden stool. "Hee hee!" Seeing that the people from the Dark Alliance were stunned, Wuji let out a cold laugh and said, "Of course there's something. I, Master Wang, would like to talk to you." As he spoke, Wuji looked at Lao Wang. Bang! Lao Wang casually pulled out his long blade and split the table in half. He then said fiercely, "I'm here for nothing but to teach you Japanese dogs a lesson. The lesson is easy to understand. It's just 8 words. A life for a life, a debt for a debt." With that, Lao Wang waved his long blade and pointed it at the Black Dragon King. "How do you want to die?" The Black Dragon King asked in shock. "We have no grudge against each other." "Why do you say that?" "No grudge against each other?" Lao Wang pointed at evildoers Run Wild and said, "You don't know me, but don't you know him? Call the Sovereign Descends over and see who this is." "This?" The Black Dragon King looked at him, then looked at Wang Yu, his face filled with confusion. At that moment, one of the players from the Dark Alliance whispered, "Boss, this person looks like evildoers Run Wild." Evildoers Run Wild. The Black Dragon King was stunned when he heard that. He sized up evildoers Run Wild in disbelief and said, You are evildoers Run Wild?" "That's right." Evildoers Run Wild nodded and said, "I am. I'm sure you know why we're here." F***CK Chapter 1645. Originally, Absent Sun thought that he would be able to reach the pinnacle of his life after bringing a rich man with him. Who would have thought that he would actually invite a wolf into his house and bring evildoers Run Wild with him? Damn it, it might even affect his future. However, what made Absent Sun feel strange was that after evildoers Run Wild's identity was revealed, the Black Dragon King did not panic in the slightest. On the contrary, he was much calmer than before. After all, the unknown was the most terrifying thing. Chuanjin's group had once tricked the Black Dragon King. As for the purpose of Wuji's visit, the Black Dragon King could not help but feel a little flustered. However, evildoers Run Wild was looking for the Black Dragon King for only one reason, and that was to go straight to the mining area. Now that he knew the purpose of Chuanjin's group, the Black Dragon King's panic was swept away. "So it's you." The Black Dragon King looked up and down at the young man who looked very similar to Wang Yu. He smiled indifferently and said, "Young man, we are all doing business. If you agree to a bet, you must be willing to lose, understand? Violence will not solve any problems." Regardless of whether it was in or out of the game, the Black Dragon King was a 3-man team. Therefore, his methods were very commercial. Although it was in the game, in the Black Dragon King's eyes, using force to fight for territory was very low-level and childish. Moreover, now that evildoers Run Wild had come knocking on his door to blackmail him, it was the lowest of the low. No, no, no. Before evildoers Run Wild could speak, Wang Yu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly waved his hand and said, "Although violence cannot solve problems, it can solve the problem of people with problems, such as you." The Black Dragon King raised an eyebrow and looked at Wang Yu. He said, "I know that you are very powerful, but can you kill me?" Crash. Following the Black Dragon King's words, the players around him stood up, pulled out their weapons, and stood in front of the Black Dragon King. At the same time, a white light flashed inside the tavern. A group of players in black armor came out and immediately surrounded Chuanjin's group. Seeing this, Wuji couldn't help but mock. "Ayayaya, the Black Boss is really a man of appearance. He didn't forget to bring so many bodyguards when he came out to talk business." "There's no other way." The Black Dragon King smiled and spread out his hands, saying, "You can't help yourself in Jianghu, let alone in your own territory. Something's wrong." Wang Yu denied it again. "This is not the territory of the Japanese. Also, it's easy for me to kill you. These small fries can only buy me some time." "Fuck!" The Black Dragon King didn't understand Chinese and needed a translator, but the players around him all understood Chinese. Hearing Wang Yu's words, the group of people burst into an uproar. Damn it, what did it mean to be arrogant? What was arrogance? Wang Yu's interpretation was incisively and vividly. Since this group of people could follow the Black Dragon King all the way to the local server to snatch territory, it was obvious that none of them were weak. In Japan, the Black Dragon Society was the largest guild. These guys were usually arrogant, but now they were treated like nothing by a grandmaster of combat. How could they tolerate this? Without waiting for the Black Dragon King's order, a warrior beside the Black Dragon King picked up a big sword and slashed at Wang Yu without saying a word. You don't know what's good for you. Seeing that the warrior charged straight at Wang Yu, the Chuanjian people couldn't bear to look at it. There were 13 Chuanjian players present, including Old Wang. Of all the people he could have hit, he had to pick the most difficult one to deal with. After all, he was a Japanese, and his actions were straightforward. In the face of the Japanese players pouncing on him, Wang Yu didn't care. He didn't dodge or evade. Just as the player slashed at him, he suddenly stretched out his left hand. Smack! Without any deviation, Wang Yu's fingertip poked the wrist of the warrior holding the sword. Wang Yu's technique was very cunning. He poked the warrior's pulse. Although there was no sense of pain in rebirth, there was a conditioned reflex. The Japanese warrior involuntarily loosened his grip, and the long sword in his hand fell to the ground. Wang Yu reacted quickly. He grabbed and stabbed with his right hand. The long sword pierced the throat of the Japanese warrior with great precision. 121145. A huge damage number floated up. The Japanese warrior died on the spot, turning into a white light. The scene changed. The unlucky warrior appeared at the resurrection point with a confused look. He looked in the direction of the tavern, his eyes full of confusion. Obviously, he was the one who made the first move. He was also the one who pulled out the knife. This could be classified as a suicide. You're asking for it. Seeing that Wang Yu dared to fight back despite being surrounded, the players from the Dark Alliance were stunned. They immediately surrounded Chuanjian's group. Although the tavern in Dark Moon City wasn't too big, it wasn't small either. Other than Chuanjian's group, there were close to 100 players from the Dark Alliance. The tavern wasn't very crowded. The Dark Dragon King was a person who did things carefully. He realized this when he ambushed his subordinate. Therefore, before Wang Yu and the others entered the tavern, the Dark Dragon King had already moved the tables and chairs in the tavern to a corner. At this time, the players from the Dark Alliance rushed in front of Chuanjian's group without any obstacles. Smack! Looking at the enemies coming from all directions, Wuji calmly snapped his fingers. Clean the floor. Chapter 1646. In the online gaming circle, the players of the Huaxia server had always been very powerful. The Dark Dragon King had suffered in this aspect before. Hence, when he came to the Huaxia server to cause trouble, the Dark Dragon King had the foresight to bring along a group of the most powerful experts from the Black Dragon Guild. However, seeing the ferocity of Chuanjian's group, even though the Dark Dragon King was already prepared for it, he was still slightly stunned, revealing a surprised expression. However, the Dark Dragon King was ultimately a sly old fox who was on par with Wuji. Under such circumstances, he was still able to maintain his calm. Seeing that the Chuanjian group had pulled into a formation and leaned against the wall, he immediately ordered his players, "Block them." That's right, block them. It looked like the Dark Dragon King's judgment was still very sharp despite his mediocre abilities. It had only been one round of battle, but the Dark Dragon King could tell that the cooperation between his group of subordinates and the experienced experts of Chuanjian was not just a level lower. Actually, thinking about it, most of the players under the Dark Dragon King were single-player games. Although their skills were not weak, this group of people was used to fighting alone and had a strong sense of heroism. Even though the game had been around for so long, their cooperation with each other was only at the level of familiarity. It was enough for them to bully ordinary players, but compared to Chuanzhen's group of top-notch experts who were skilled in teamwork, they were still lacking. After giving the order, the Dark Dragon King took 2 steps back, pushing behind the group of players from the Dark Alliance. Without any hesitation, he turned around and ran out of the bar. The Dark Dragon King naturally understood the principle of capturing the ringleader first. He also knew what Chuanzhen and his group wanted to do. The most important thing now was to protect himself. Of course, the Dark Dragon King was cunning, and Wuji was not going to give in. Seeing that the players from the Dark Alliance had blocked their vision, he guessed the Dark Dragon King's intentions. He immediately shouted, "The Dark Dragon King is escaping! Quick, chase him back!" However, at that moment, the players from the Dark Alliance had already surrounded the Chuanzhen group, once again tightly surrounding them. They even launched a wave of attacks. Magic arrows and long swords flew toward the Chuanzhen group. "Hide behind me!" Seeing this, Yin Lao Er, who was in the front row, let out a loud roar. His body flashed with a red light, and his body immediately expanded by several times. As if he had taken an accelerant, he became a 5-meter-tall, 2-meter-wide giant. The Divine God's shield in Yin Lao Er's hand also grew to the size of a city gate. The body of a giant. It was a level 60 ultimate skill for shield warriors. Upon activation, the user could instantly transform. Not only would the user's size increase, but their strength, defense, and HP would also double. It was the signature ultimate skill of shield warriors. Even more frightening was the fact that Yin Lao Er's equipment granted him the buff of giant's body. Even if a normal shield warrior were to gigantify, they would only be able to grow to a height of 3 meters or so. With the buff from his equipment, Yin Lao Er was nearly twice as tall as an ordinary player. If the tavern hadn't been built in a Western-style architectural style, Yin Lao Er's head would have been stuck to the ceiling after transforming into a giant. Crash! After completing his transformation, Yin Lao Er placed the giant shield in front of him and raised it diagonally upward. Immediately after, Yin Lao Er took a step forward. Boom! A loud sound shook the entire tavern. Dang, 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 dang. After a series of chaotic sounds, all the attacks landed on Yin Lao Er's shield. As Mingdu had just cleared out a wave of players, there were only 70 to 80 players left in the Dark Alliance. A wave of attacks landed on Yin Lao Er's gigantified shield, but it didn't hurt at all. Grandson! At the same time, Yin Lao Er stuck out his middle finger and used a group taunt skill. Whoosh! The body of a giant had not only enlarged Yin Lao Er's body, but the attack range of his skills had also increased significantly. Originally, the area of effect of the group taunt skill was less than 2 meters. However, with the support of the body of a giant, with Yin Lao Er at the center, all players within a 6-meter radius were taunted, and they were then involuntarily sucked into Yin Lao Er's body. At that time, Mingdu's second wave of magic had already landed. In an instant, thunder fell from the sky, and fire burned on the ground. Yin Lao Er stood in the middle of Mingdu's magic like a god of war. White light rose around him, and the light shone on Yin Lao Er's face, making his aura even more astonishing. With this wave of cooperation, the Dark Alliance players in the tavern were almost completely wiped out, with only a few long-range professions left. However, before they could recover from the shock of their comrades being wiped out, the air suddenly distorted. Ming Jian Daoxue and Bai Ming Yuyu appeared behind the few of them. The two of them wielded daggers, running and slashing as they ran, as if they were harvesting, taking care of the few weak-skinned players at the back. As for the bandit leader, the Dark Dragon King, he sneaked out of the tavern while Chuanzhen was slaughtering his brothers. The Dark Dragon King was the behind-the-scenes boss of the Dark Alliance. The group of people from the Quanzhen sect were not here for the small fries. After clearing out the players of the Dark Alliance, the group followed closely behind and charged out of the bar. Chapter 1647. All right. Mingdu laughed and moved to the back of the formation. Yin Lao Air raised his shield to protect Mingdu. At the same time, a pair of wings extended from Mingdu's back, and he flew into the air with a flap of his wings. You're going to use this move again? Seeing Mingdu fly into the air, the Dark Dragon King could not help but let out a cold laugh. The same move could not be used twice against a Saint Seiya. The Dark Dragon King had fallen for Wuji's trick the last time because he did not know that Mingdu had such a shameless equipment like wings. How could he not be on guard this time? Even though flying in the air gave one an absolute advantage, it depended on the situation. Back in Yamatai City, the Black Dragon Guild did not have many players. Most of them were sea fighters who were close combat professions. They were helpless against Chuanjin and his group, who could fly in the air. Now, the thousands of people on the street were all from the Dark Alliance. So what if Mingdu could fly? Could he break through the archers' line of defense? Archers! Shoot him down! Following the Dark Dragon King's command, the archers on the street raised their longbows and aimed at Mingdu. Shoot! As soon as this command was given, countless arrows flew toward Radiant City like a swarm of locusts. Ha ha! Radiant Doe chuckled and flapped its wings, soaring several meters into the air. Archers were the profession with the longest attack range in Rebirth. Even so, an archer's shooting range was only a few dozen meters. Unless it was a perverted archer like the Death God's left hand, he would not be able to exceed 100 meters. Now that the archers of the Dark Alliance were shooting from below, their shooting range was slightly reduced. Mingdu easily flew out of the archer's shooting range once he flew up. Everyone knew that Mingdu was a despicable person. This lad could have flown higher, but he only flew up a little, just barely out of the archer's shooting range. Seeing that their attacks were just a millimeter away from hitting the sole of Mingdu's foot, the players below cried out. Seeing this, Mingdu did not forget to take off his pants and defecate to mock the people below. The players of the Dark Alliance below were infuriated, and they wanted to swallow him whole, turn him into feces, and feed him to the dogs. Kill this ugly freak! Everyone roared as they once again knocked their arrows and aimed at Mingdu in the sky. Aya, who pushed me? I'll *CK your mom. However, before they could launch the second wave of attacks, they suddenly heard a commotion behind them. Everyone hurriedly turned their heads and looked back, only to see a group of guards carrying spears, breaking through the formation and rushing towards the tavern. The system guards were famous for being hotheads. Not only were they inflexible, but they were also extremely ruthless. Anyone who was touched by them would either die or be severely injured. The players who were pushed to the side were the lucky ones. The unlucky ones were trampled into white light on the spot. *CK. What's going on? Seeing the sudden arrival of the guards, the players of the Dark Alliance were dumbfounded. What the *CK is going on? Could it be that this group of people can command the system guards? How shameless can they be? Of course, this was just everyone's imagination running wild. The city guards were the direct subordinates of the system. Apart from the city lord, no one else had the right to mobilize them. What right did the people from the Quanjin sect have to summon the city guards? Bastard! How dare you use such a method to lure the guards? The Dark Dragon King was a sly old fox after all. He quickly reacted when he saw the guards charging over. Damn it, how is this commanding the guards? He's using himself as bait to lure the guards over. Logically speaking, killing each other in different camps would not increase the PK value. However, Chuanjin was different. They were definitely in the neutral camp. What was neutral? It meant excluding people who were not involved in the war. Other camps could kill players from the neutral camp for no reason, and players from the neutral camp could not kill players from other camps for no reason. Although the players of the Dark Alliance who were killed by Chuanjin were all Japanese, they were now residents of the Heroes Continent since they were registered in the Heroes Continent. Chuanjin and his group had just killed over 100 people in the bar. 2 of the new large-scale killing skills were thrown by Mingdu. At this moment, Mingdu could be said to have killed many people, and his PK value was close to 100. One could imagine the consequences of daring to kill so brazenly in the city. It was normal for the guards to be sent out to kill him. However, from the looks of it now, it was obvious that Xuanzhen had the intention to throw all the PK value at Mingdu. The Dark Dragon King thought that his arrangements were extremely strict, but he did not expect that there would be a loophole, allowing Wuji to take advantage of it. It could not be helped. The Dark Dragon King had not been targeted by Wuji's Muslim style of fighting. Who would have thought that this bastard would dare to throw a bucket of sh*t at the crowd? Uncle Nyo did not need to explain how strong the guards were. Other than the almighty beings of the universe like Uncle Nyo, I do not recommend anyone to imitate Mingdu's gratification. The guards were caught off guard, and they charged from the streets to Mingdu's feet. The players of the Dark Alliance were cut up like vegetables. They were knocked into a mess by the guards, and there were many casualties. As for the encirclement, a large gap was torn open by the guards. Hee. Looking at the players of the Dark Alliance who were falling all over the place and had no time to care about their group, the despicable Xuanzhen hounds smiled and shouted from below, "Xiao Ming, fly to the left and right. Ah, do a roll. Old Li, fly in a circle. Go to hell." Mingdu rolled his eyes at the group and said, "Quickly call me Grandpa Mingdu, or I will fly to your side. F***ck. The group raised their middle fingers at Mingdu, who was in the sky. While the Xuanzhen hounds were messing around, Grandpa Wang Yu and the other two were naturally not idling around. The formation of the Dark Alliance had already been broken apart. This group of scattered players posed no threat to Wang Yu and the other two. 3 rays of light flashed past, and the 3 of them charged into the crowd. Wang Yu was the fastest, charging at the very front. Evildoers Run Wild equipped himself and followed closely behind. Old Wang had added his full power points, but his equipment was average, so he was at the back. The 3 of them were all top-notch experts, especially Wang Yu and Old Wang. No one could match them in terms of skill, and any one of them could be considered a match for tens of thousands of people. The morale of the players of the Dark Alliance had already collapsed. How could they defend against these 3 tigers and wolves? With the guards at the side, as a neutral player, Wang Yu could not kill more than 5 times a day. His subordinates had death quotas, and he could not kill indiscriminately. Thus, the rough work of killing people was left to Old Wang and Evildoers Run Wild, while Wang Yu led the way at the front. Evildoers Run Wild had immense strength, and there was no one who could withstand a single blow from him. Old Wang's large blade was ferocious, fast, and accurate. Those who were hit would die, and those who were touched would die. Chapter 1648. Block them! Block them! The Dark Dragon King had many subordinates, but his own abilities were pitifully low. Seeing the Wang father and son trio charge forward, cutting a bloody path through the tens of thousands of people and charging toward him, the usually calm Dark Dragon King was scared out of his wits, no matter how strong his mental fortitude was. He retreated as he shouted loudly. The Dark Dragon King was indeed a difficult character to deal with. He knew that most of the players in the Dark Alliance would not understand his word. Even if they understood, they would not risk their lives to save him. Thus, he took out his gold coins and ran to scatter them. As players from Unhindered the World, this group of people did not care about anything. They only cared about money. The Black Dragon King scattered gold coins all over the place. Seeing this, the players from Unhindered the World rushed towards the Black Dragon King like fish fighting for food, forming a thick human wall in a matter of minutes. Damn! Seeing this scene, the people of Xuanzhen were dumbfounded. As the saying went, strength in numbers was not just a saying. These cannon fodder had displayed such great potential under the influence of money. It had to be said that the Dark Dragon King was not the strongest opponent Xuanzhen had ever faced, but he was definitely the most difficult opponent Xuanzhen had ever faced. After all, no matter how strong the others were, Wang Yu alone would be able to take them down in minutes. However, the sly Dark Dragon King was able to deal with the Wang father and son trio, as well as Chuanjin and the previous wave of guards. It was obvious how difficult it was to deal with him. No matter how strong Wang Yu and the other two were, there was still a limit. Under the restrictions of the system's attributes, it was reasonable for them to kill 1 or 2 players in an instant. If they could really tear apart this terrifying human wall, the game would have to shut down as soon as possible. With the support of the coin scattering skill, the Dark Dragon King finally managed to block Wang Yu and the other two. He then tossed the bag of coins in his hand into the air, turned around, and ran toward the crossroad. Not good. He's going to turn. Seeing this, Wuji's expression could not help but change slightly. Unlike the keyboard and mouse MMORPG of the past, Rebirth was a full simulation game. In a brand new mode, the players were no longer in the perspective of God. Because of this, there was a corner law in Rebirth. Once a player who was being chased made a turn, they would have many ways to escape. They could go to a room, log off, or even change their equipment. In any case, there were endless possibilities, and it created a misunderstanding in the player's thinking. It was commonly known as Schrodinger's corner. Actually, the reason I said so much was to fill up the number of words. Even so, Wang Yu had easily dodged his attack. It was easy to imagine Falcon Dragon's current mood. There was no time to lament over his opponent's strength. Falcon Dragon waved his hand at the Black Dragon King and said, "Boss, you go first. I'll hold them off here." Saying so, Falcon Dragon formed a hand seal. His left hand pressed down on his right wrist, while his right index finger and middle finger flicked upward. Bang, 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 bang! A series of explosions rang out as the 4 darts behind Wang Yu exploded into clouds of smoke. Before the smoke could dissipate, 4 masked players in black rushed out of the smoke and appeared behind Wang Yu in an instant. Without hesitation, they pulled out daggers from their pockets and stabbed at Wang Yu's ribs, the back of his heart, the back of his neck, and the back of his head. Seeing the 4 masked players behind Wang Yu, Falcon Dragon coldly snorted and said, "I refuse to believe that you can dodge this time." Dragon Falcon knew how powerful Wang Yu was. If Wang Yu was in his normal state, Dragon Falcon naturally wouldn't think that Wang Yu wouldn't be able to dodge this attack. However, Wang Yu's leg was currently being held by someone else and he couldn't move at all. If Wang Yu could still dodge in this state, Dragon Falcon would definitely accept his fate. Falcon Dragon's guess was correct. Wang Yu could not dodge the attack. However, Wang Yu had no intention of dodging either. Chapter 1649. The skill Falcon Dragon had used was called Shadow Clone. There was a huge difference between the stats of a clone and the player itself, not to mention that the opponent was a ferocious person like Wang Yu. After grabbing the dagger, Wang Yu twisted his waist, grabbed the doppelganger, and swung it backwards. The doppelganger was thrown out and accurately hit the other 3 doppelgangers. Bang! A cloud of smoke rose into the air. The 4 clones were instantly annihilated. Damn! Seeing that his clones couldn't even withstand a single blow from Wang Yu, Falcon Dragon opened his mouth and spat out a large fireball at Wang Yu. Wang Yu calmly crouched on the ground. With a flip of his hand, his glove transformed into a dagger. With a casual swing, a cold light flashed, and the black hand beneath Wang Yu's feet was sliced in half. At this moment, Wang Yu rolled forward to dodge the Falcon Dragon's fireball. After dodging the attack, Wang Yu didn't remain idle. He rose to his feet, bent his knees, and pushed off the ground. His entire body shot past Falcon Dragon like a cannonball toward the Black Dragon King. However, at this moment, a few more black shadows appeared on the ground and the walls on both sides of the street. 7 or 8 players dressed like Falcon Dragon drilled out of the ground and walls, blocking Wang Yu's path. Seeing these people blocking his way, Wang Yu grew a little impatient. Wang Yu didn't really care about a mere 7 or 8 people, but the Black Dragon King was getting farther and farther away. The strength of these 7 people was clearly on par with Falcon Dragon. Experts of this level weren't any weaker than Chuanjians. Even if they worked together, they still wouldn't be able to defeat Wang Yu. However, it wouldn't be difficult for them to delay Wang Yu until the Black Dragon King reached the corner of the street. Boom! However, just when Wang Yu felt that the situation was troublesome and was about to stop, a black broadsword suddenly flew from behind Wang Yu and arrived in front of Wang Yu. The broadsword cleaved the expert in front of Wang Yu in half, creating an opening in the formation. The speed of the saber was extremely fast. It killed the person in one slash, and only after the corpse fell to the ground did it turn into white light. At the same time, a deep voice came from behind Wang Yu. "You go after them, leave this to me." Hearing this voice, Wang Yu was immediately reassured. He ignored the people blocking his way, crossed the gap, and once again chased after the Dark Dragon King. Falcon Dragon and the others' objective was to stop Wang Yu. When they saw that Wang Yu didn't stop and continued to force his way forward, they immediately dispersed. However, at this moment, the man with the long blade caught up with them and leaped in front of Falcon Dragon's group. At that moment, the others had already arrived in front of Evildoers Run Wild. Falcon Dragon and the others were obviously assassins. Evildoers Run Wild's insane stat points were even more terrifying than warriors. If an assassin were to get close to him, it could only be described as a tragic sight. Falcon Dragon, who was fighting against Old Wang, had experienced this firsthand. Old Wang had made a name for himself since he was young, and had experienced hundreds of battles. Fighting was basically his career for the first half of his life. Even though this old man's equipment and level weren't that high, his battle prowess was so high that even Wang Yu couldn't compare to him. Falcon Dragon was naturally no match for him. Old Wang didn't even look at the charging Falcon Dragon. He narrowed his eyes and allowed Falcon Dragon's dagger to stab into his body. At the same time, he grabbed at the air behind him. Bang! Falcon Dragon's attack landed on Old Wang, but didn't deal any damage. Instead, Old Wang dragged a figure out of thin air. That figure was undoubtedly Falcon Dragon. Falcon Dragon's hand that was holding onto his weapon was tightly held in Old Wang's hand. Naturally, he panicked and struggled to break free. Old Wang was a ruthless person who didn't speak much. He grabbed Falcon Dragon's hand and pulled him back while his other hand stabbed forward with his large blade, directly piercing through Falcon Dragon's body. The pitiful Falcon Dragon didn't think that he would die in the hands of an uncle like this, and that he would die so easily. Falcon Dragon's death was swift, and Evildoers Run Wild situation wasn't that complicated. With a flash of white light in less than 30 seconds, Falcon Dragon and his team were wiped out by Old Wang and his father, and were sent back to the resurrection point. Chapter 1650. The Dark Dragon King's abilities were weak. Without a group of subordinates, his battle prowess was basically zero. Now that he had been captured by a group of experts from Chuanjian, there was naturally no way he could escape. Evildoers Run Wild and Lao Wang were efficient in their attacks, sending Falcon Dragon's team back to the revival point in a single round. Wang Yu had just returned to the bar with the Dark Dragon King when Evildoers Run Wild and Yin Lao Air followed closely behind. Wuji looked at Evildoers Run Wild who had returned, then looked at the Dark Dragon King that Wang Yu had casually tossed onto the ground. He waved his hand at Yin Lao Air and said, "Second brother, block the door." "All right." Yin Lao Air nodded and placed the shield in his hand horizontally, blocking the entrance of the bar tightly. The players from the Dark Alliance were all blocked outside. After doing all this, Wuji said to Evildoers Run Wild, "All right? Next will be your feud with him, old demon." "Humph." Looking at the Black Dragon King on the ground, rampaging demonic demon, Shao Chun felt a surge of anger. Evildoers Run Wild had always had a strong personality. Ever since he started playing the game, he had never lost to anyone other than Wang Yu and Lao Wang. To move unhindered with his subordinates, No one would object to calling him the #1 player in the game. Despite being surrounded by so many halos, Rampant was still extremely conceited. However, it was precisely because of this weakling, who stood less than 5 feet tall, that the powerful guild he had single-handedly created had been uprooted in just a single day. Even he himself had nearly fallen victim to Rampant's evil schemes. At that moment, the Dark Dragon King was lying at Evildoers Run Wild's feet. One could imagine how Evildoers Run Wild felt. He wanted to stomp the Dark Dragon King to death 180 times on the spot. Of course, the Black Dragon King was obviously a person who was not afraid of death. They were all merchants, and they paid particular attention to persuading others with reason. Means came first. Although fighting and killing were effective, it would inevitably be disadvantageous. Evildoers Run Wild resisted the urge to stomp the Black Dragon King to death with one foot in order to maintain his lofty attitude of making a comeback from the loser. He lowered his head and said coldly, "Just now you've also said that if you're willing to bet, you're willing to accept your loss. Now what else do you have to say?" Bao San stood at the side and translated the disdain in Evildoers Run Wild's words to the Black Dragon King. What a pitiful fellow. Fortunately, he didn't know Mandarin. He had to listen to the same disdain twice. However, the surprising thing was that even though the Black Dragon King was pressed to the ground and watched, he did not look like a loser at all. Hearing Evildoers Run Wild's words, the Black Dragon King sneered and said calmly, "Oh? Concede defeat? Do you think you've won? Anyway, the one lying on the ground is not me." Evildoers Run Wild unceremoniously poked at the Black Dragon King's scar. It was indeed a bit embarrassing for an ambitious and ruthless person to be in such a sorry state. However, the Black Dragon King did not care at all and said, "Little brother, we are merchants, not warriors. How can victory or defeat be determined by this? To move unhindered to ransom or to take back the mining area? How dare you say that I've lost so shamelessly?" Contrary to Wang Yu, who was not good with words, Evildoers Run Wild was usually a person with a sharp tongue. However, at this time, after being ridiculed by the Black Dragon King, Evildoers Run Wild's face turned red and he was actually speechless. What the Black Dragon King said was right. Since they were all working in a gaming studio, the final judgment of victory was of course the ownership of interest. If the person with the bigger fist won, the Black Dragon King had no interest in talking nonsense with Evildoers Run Wild. Evildoers Run Wild thought for a moment and said, "You still dare to be so stubborn when you're at death's door. Why don't you look at where you are now? Right now you're already meat on the chopping board. As long as you give me the contract, I can consider letting you go." "Go?" The Black Dragon King smiled and said, "Why should I go? To move unhindered players to follow you again if you kill me, and you can take back the mining area? Save it. This is a game. If you kill me, I'll only lose some insignificant experience. Even if you lock me up, I can still communicate with my subordinate." Speaking up to this point, the Black Dragon King took a breath and continued, "I thought you were a genius to be able to single-handedly establish the largest guild in the entire game. I didn't expect your methods to be so low and childish. It's really disappointing. It seems like I've overestimated you." **CK. In the end, he was still a young man in his 20s, full of vigor and vigor. After being ridiculed by the wily old fox, the Black Dragon King, the evildoer, he was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. He raised his hand to crush the Black Dragon King. Seeing this, the Black Dragon King was not afraid at all. Instead, he stretched out his neck and looked like he was going to die a martyr's death. "Little Fei, don't be impulsive." Seeing that Evildoers Run Wild was angry, Wang Yu hurriedly grabbed onto Evildoers Run Wild's wrist. Wu Ji also said faintly, "This old thing is stirring up your anger. It wasn't easy for us to capture him. If you kill him, won't he escape again?" **CK. Looking at the Black Dragon King lying on the ground that he could neither kill nor argue with, the frustration in Evildoer's Run Wild's heart was indescribable. He could only vent his anger by cursing. At this moment, Chun Xiang came over and pointed at the Black Dragon King. "Old thing, don't think that killing you is useless. As long as you are below level 10, the Dark Alliance will cease to exist. Let's see how you can continue to be arrogant then." "Is that so?" The Black Dragon King smiled and revealed a title, Black Dragon Guild Leader. Chun Xiang was instantly speechless when he revealed the title of Black Dragon King. It was impossible for one person to be the guild leader of two guilds. Since the Black Dragon King still had the title of Black Dragon Guild Leader, it was obvious that this sly old fox was not the guild leader of the Dark Alliance. Hee. Seeing Chun Xiang's expression, the Black Dragon King smiled proudly. "A fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. Ever since I lost to you the last time, I've understood something. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. I didn't think that I wouldn't be able to enter, but an idiot like you is still making no progress?" Not only was the sly old fox the Black Dragon King two-faced, his mouth was also very venomous. Chun Xiang was rendered speechless by his words. "Damn you!" Chun Xiang rolled his eyes at the Black Dragon King, resisting the urge to stab the bastard to death. Bao San, who had been acting as a translator, could not stand it any longer when he saw his brother being humiliated by a Japanese dog. He shook his head and sighed. "I think we should just kill him. I don't believe that the contract won't drop." Wuji raised his eyebrows and said, "This old thing is very sly. Do you think he would keep something as important as the contract on him?" "That's right." To place one's pride chimed in from the side. "Only an idiot would keep the contract on him. To think that you, Bao San, could come up with such a lousy idea. Little friend, watch your words." Evildoer's Run Wild's expression darkened when he heard this. He waited for to place one's pride, his face filled with killing intent. Even though there was a reason for this, Evildoer's Run Wild had indeed kept the contract on him. "Uncle Demon, you're an exception." Chapter 1651. Ha ha! The Dark Dragon King could not help but laugh when he saw how helpless the Chuanjian people were. He mocked Evildoer's Run Wild. "How is it, young man? Who has lost now?" F***CKU. Evildoer's Run Wild's heart crumbled when he heard the Dark Dragon King's words. Only now did the Evildoer Rampage realize that he had spent so much effort to capture the Black Dragon King, but it was actually useless. This old fart was just a pain in the ass. He was not afraid of death, and was not afraid of getting beaten up. He would be angry if he did not kill the Dark Dragon King. Killing the Dark Dragon King would not be of any use, and he would have a reputation for being unscrupulous. He did not expect this B***** to be so invulnerable. "You seem very pleased with yourself." The Dark Dragon King's pleased laughter reached everyone's ears. Wuji could not help but knit his brows. Why? The Dark Dragon King knew that the Chuanjian people would not kill him so easily. He could not help but say smugly when he heard Wuji's words, "Then kill me. Let's see who wins and who loses." "Kill you?" Wuji let out a cold laugh. "Why would I kill you? You know you can't do it? Then let me go. I might spare your lives if I'm in a good mood." The Dark Dragon King was still very pleased with himself. "No, no, no." Wuji waved his hand and said, "I just want you to watch a good show." "A good show? What good show?" The Dark Dragon King was stunned when he heard that and asked cautiously. "Name to be determined." Wuji rubbed his chin and said, "Let's call it the destruction of the Dark Alliance for now." "Ha! With just you guys?" The Dark Dragon King once again revealed a disdainful smile when he heard Wuji's words. To move unhindered, the Dark Alliance had not only absorbed all of the original players, but had also recruited many new players. To move unhindered in terms of scale was even greater than before. Although the Quan Zhen sect was fierce, they only had a dozen or so people. A mere dozen or so people threatened to snatch the mine from the hands of millions of players. Such words were naturally nonsense in the eyes of the Black Dragon King. After all, the mining area was the true territory of the millions of players in the Dark Alliance. They could play tricks and ignore their boss, the Dark Dragon King, but the mining area was something they relied on to survive. It was their bottom line, and they would definitely not ignore it. Of course not. Wuji waved his hand and said, "The game world is huge, and it's not just our two guilds. Have you ever experienced the despair of being targeted by everyone?" What do you mean? The Black Dragon Guild was bewildered. However, before he could react to what was going on, a server-wide announcement sounded in the sky. The server announcement was similar to the system announcement. It could transmit a player's words to every corner of the game world. Even the Dark Alliance players could not help but feel conflicted when they saw Wuji's announcement, but there was nothing they could do. To move unhindered was because most of the players in the Dark Alliance were old players. These people had merged their entire guilds under the banner of the Dark Alliance. They did not leave their guilds and wait for 24 hours to rejoin, so their contracts were already in effect. They had just lost money to evildoers run wild, and now they had to pay the Black Dragon King? This was obviously a bit difficult, but a contract was a contract. The Black Dragon King could not do anything about it. He could only grit his teeth and bear with it. Among the angry local players, the biggest guilds in the main cities were the most anxious. The news of the Dark Alliance annexing the reigning world had spread like wildfire, and everyone knew about it. Everyone had witnessed the large guilds snatching the territory of the reigning world. As for how the Dark Alliance's mining area came about, everyone knew. From a certain point of view, the guilds that had snatched the territory of reigning the world and sold it to the Dark Alliance were no different from traders trying to profit from their country's calamity. Snatching something from their own people and selling it to the Japanese in the face of a great enemy was a crime deserving of death. On the other hand, Chuanjin, who had always been scolded as shameless trash, had helped the country to tilt at a critical moment, giving money and effort to drive out the Japanese slaves for free. Chapter 1652. It was fine if they were outshone by others. After all, everyone was on the same level and it didn't matter who was better. But now that they were outshone by a guild like Chuanjin, the nature of the situation had completely changed. Many large guilds were either disdainful or disgusted when they talked about Chuanjin. After all, good shoes shouldn't step on dog poop. Chuanjin's image had been heavily demonized by these large guilds. But the reality was that the large guilds were profiting from their country's troubles, and Chuanjin had displayed the conscience of a guild in the country at this time. One had to know that Chuanjin was a small guild with less than 20 people. Just these few people had done things that put guilds with tens of thousands of people to shame. In comparison, the image of those large guilds became smaller and smaller in the eyes of the country's players, while Chuanjin's image became bigger and bigger. The people of the country had always been tolerant. What was justice? What was wretchedness? What was a good reputation? No matter what kind of image the Quanjin sect had in the past, or what they had done in the past, now that they had a clear conscience in front of the country, not to mention that those things were just rumors, even if the Quanjin sect had really done a lot of bad things, everyone would immediately forgive them. In most situations, the higher one's position was, the less they cared about their country. These leaders of large guilds were quite disdainful of the angry players. But now that things had come to this, no matter how disdainful they were, they didn't dare to show it. The most important thing for the large guilds in the game was their reputation. Now that the identity of the Dark Alliance had been exposed, the large guilds that had sold the mines to the Dark Alliance were at the heart of the struggle. If they said anything wrong at this time, their own guild might be pinned with a label that they couldn't wash away. Collaborating with the enemy and betraying the country was a label that people would point at behind their back. The bad reputation of the guild would be spread far and wide, and being scolded by billions of people would be a light punishment. Their decades of work might be destroyed in a day. The most important thing now was to draw a line with the Dark Alliance. What do we do? What do we do? In the office of the Blood Alliance, Blood Red War Flag panicked after seeing Wuji's announcement. Once Wuji's announcement was made, all the guilds that had sold the mines were under suspicion of colluding with foreign countries. Blood Red War Flag felt wronged. All Asians looked the same, and it was not as if there were no dwarves in the local server. Who would have known that the founder of the Dark Alliance was actually a Japanese? If they had known, no one would have sold the mining area. Moreover, Wuji was the one who had planned for his guild to sell the mine. Now that he had become an indirect victim, who was he supposed to reason with? The crime of being a traitor was not something that could be washed clean with money. Why don't we just make an announcement to explain the situation? Seeing Blood Red War Flag's panic, Blood Shura suggested. What a shitty idea. Regarding Scarlet Shura's idea, Scarlet Wind Whisper expressed its most sincere disdain. If you say so, then so be it. If you don't say anything, why should anyone believe you? Wasn't that right? The mines were stolen by the big guilds, and the big guilds were also the ones who sold them cheaply. Yet, in the end, they claimed that they didn't know anything. Even they felt guilty when they said this. How could the players of the national server believe them? It's one thing for you to betray the enemy and betray the country, but you're also blatantly treating us as fools. Do you still want to live in this world? Then what do you think we should do? Blood Red War Flag looked at Scarlet Wind Whisper and asked. If you ask me. Scarlet Wind Whisper thought for a while and said, we don't need to explain. Explaining is the same as covering up. Either we keep quiet and no one will notice us, or we make up for our mistakes. It's not too late to show everyone our sincerity. Make up for my mistakes? Before Blood Red War Flag could react to Scarlet Wind Whisper's words, his friends list suddenly flashed. Blood Red War Flag quickly opened it and saw a message from Wuji. Old Flag, are you panicking? Damn. Isn't that right? Blood Red War Flag was speechless. You still have the mood to laugh at me. What are you talking about? Wuji quickly replied. I'm giving you a chance to make a name for yourself. Through the chat, Blood Red War Flag could feel Wuji's tone. He then said in surprise, Oh? What chance? Wuji laughed. This way, you can guarantee your Blood Alliance's fame and fortune. Is this okay? Seeing Wuji's message, Blood Red War Flag was a little confused. Of course you can. Wuji said, hurry up, or else the other guilds will get it first. After saying that, there was no more message from Wuji. Only Blood Red War Flag was left looking at the contents of the chat in silence. What's going on? Scarlet Wind Whisper saw that Blood Red War Flag was suddenly silent. There's a message from Wuji, Blood Red War Flag said. He wants me to apologize in front of the local players and promise to recover the mine without compensation. Saying this, Blood Red War Flag was depressed. It's okay to recover the mine without compensation. We don't need those hundreds of thousands of gold coins, but we didn't do anything wrong. Why should we apologize? Boss. Bloody Wind Whisperer was speechless. Whether you did anything wrong or not is one thing, but what other people think is another. I think Boss Wuji is giving you another chance. You must grasp it. Bloody Wind Whisperer was speechless. Chapter 1653. When everyone found out that Yu Huiqing's city lord was the #1 expert in Chuanjian, they were even more amazed. It was no wonder that Yu Huiqing's guild was righteous. It turned out that the city lord was also from Chuanjian. There was a reason why Yu Huiqing was able to form guilds like Chuanjian and the Blood Alliance. This is F***King possible? Blood Red War Flag was dumbfounded after receiving a wave of praise for their announcement. The unhappiness they felt from apologizing instantly disappeared. As expected, sometimes an apology was more useful than an explanation. Of course, the effect of Blood Red War Flag's announcement was not just that. To the other guilds, the experts of Blood Red War Flag were a role model. Everyone had snatched the mines and sold them to the Dark Alliance. At that moment, they were facing the same problem. Initially, everyone was helpless. Once Blood Red War Flag's announcement was released, they immediately received a wave of praise. Everyone played guilds and was not a fool. They naturally did not need anyone to remind them what to do. Not long after Blood Red War Flag's announcement was released, the other guilds also put up their announcements. The content of the announcement was the same. They expressed that they were willing to make up for their mistakes by snatching back the mines that they had thrown away for free. As for the 500,000 gold that Chuanjin had offered, no one dared to accept it. After all, they had sold the mines. It was reasonable for them to sell and snatch it back. If they asked for the 500,000 gold coins, their apology just now would not be sincere at all. No one wanted the 500,000 gold coins, but they wanted it for themselves. How shameless could they be? Furthermore, it was only 500,000 gold coins. To the big guilds, it was really not a big deal. The Dark Alliance had just given them 500,000 gold coins in cash, and had not had the time to use it yet. Furthermore, the Dark Alliance had forced them to buy and sell. This made the other big guilds rather unhappy. Everyone snatched back their territories as a way to regain their pride. Looking at the announcement after announcement on the public screen, the people of Chuanjin and Evildoers Run Wild gave Wuji a sincere thumbs up. Even old Wang could not help but exclaim, "Awesome, you're still awesome." Everyone's exclamation was definitely from the bottom of their hearts. No one had expected Wuji's announcement to cause such a huge reaction. The Quanjin sect had not only successfully stirred up conflict between the players of the local server and the Dark Alliance, it had also made the name of the Quanjin sect spread far and wide. It had turned from a notorious small guild into the most responsible and heroic guild in the game. It could be said that it had gained both fame and fortune. Chapter 1654. Although Evildoers Run Wild's words were crude, they came from the bottom of his heart and were deeply moving. To move unhindered players felt guilty upon seeing this, especially when they heard that the evildoer Rampage was willing to pay the penalty for leaving the Dark Alliance. The players who had left reigning the world to join the Dark Alliance felt even more ashamed. Why didn't everyone leave the Dark Alliance on the spot after knowing that it was the Japanese's business? It was because of the penalty. To the miners who relied on mining to support their families, the penalty was not a small amount. The server was lacking in everything, but not in people. Even three-legged toads could run all over the place, and two-legged miners were plentiful as well. Everyone did not stay and fight alongside Evildoers Run Wild when Evildoer was at his most difficult. Now that the mines they relied on for survival had been robbed and food was a problem, not only did Evildoers Run Wild not bear a grudge, he even repaid evil with good and paid the penalty out of his own pocket. Where else could they find such a benevolent boss? If there was a crack in the mines, these miners would want nothing more than to crawl into it to move unhindered players. Other than the veteran players at the beginning, most of the miners had only heard of Evildoers Run Wild's name. They had not interacted with Evildoers Run Wild before and did not know much about Evildoers Run Wild's character. To move unhindered players did not have a cohesive group and would scatter whenever something happened. Now, Evildoers Run Wild's benevolent and righteous actions made these miners feel the magnanimity of a guild leader. At the same time, they were convinced by Evildoers Run Wild's magnanimity. To move unhindered, Evildoers Run Wild, the person who gave everyone a job and helped them redeem their freedom, would become the faith of everyone. Every single one of the miners here owed Evildoers Run Wild a favor. Although the word faith sounded illusory, to a large organization like a guild, faith was a cohesive force. A cohesive guild would be even more united. To move unhindered, the power of millions of players gathered because of Evildoers Run Wild one could only imagine how much energy it would have. It may be a blessing in disguise. To move unhindered, if they had not regained what they had lost, evildoers run wild might never have learned their lesson, nor would they have had the chance to win people's hearts. From this, it could be seen that this false alarm was not necessarily a bad thing for evildoers run wild and to move unhindered. As for the Black Dragon King, although he couldn't understand the contents of the announcement, he had already guessed what evildoers run wild would do after hearing Wuji's words. The guilds under the Dark Alliance quickly left. The Dark Dragon King's gaze was dull, his heart dead. Wuji was definitely not bluffing. As the owner of the route, Wang Yu had absolute authority to control the entry and exit of any player. As long as the target player's name was put on the blacklist, the player would lose the right of passage. This, hearing Wuji's words, the Dark Dragon King could not help but frown. At this time, Wuji said again, a friendly reminder. The Neon people are detested in the local server. You guys dare to register a guild in our local server. Do you want to be enemies with the players in the local server? Think about it. You're not afraid of death, but are your brothers not afraid of death too? Money is just a worldly possession. Don't tell me a smart person like you doesn't know how to choose? Speaking of the ability to bewitch people, if Wuji said that he was second, no one would dare to say that they were first. With just a few words, even a troublemaker like the Dark Dragon King began to hesitate. Indeed, the Dark Dragon King was not afraid of death because his level was low, but the group of subordinates he brought were all experts. How could they die with him? Now that the Dark Dragon King's identity was exposed, he was detested in the local server. A mere few hundred people could only be described as insignificant in front of hundreds of millions of players. The mining plan had failed, and there was no place for the Dark Dragon King and his group in the local server. Going home was the only way out. Otherwise, they would just be waiting to die. Chapter 1655. The penalty fee for so many people was not a small amount. It was a windfall for anyone. If it was a normal player, they would have logged off without a second thought. Even if they stopped playing, they wouldn't spit out the money. However, the Black Dragon King could not do so. In the system settings, players had loans on them and their gold coins could not be put up for sale. In other words, the Black Dragon King had a huge amount of money, but it was only game coins. If he wanted to exchange it for RMB, he had to exchange it with someone in cash. The later the game, the more gold coins were produced. The exchange rate between gold coins and RMB would also decrease. Money didn't grow on trees. Even the tycoon players bought gold coins according to the exchange rate. The Black Dragon King had such a large amount of gold coins in his hands. No one would buy it all at once. Even if there was, the Black Dragon King would not dare to show his face in public. The only way this old thing could sell gold coins was by putting them up for sale. However, the Black Dragon King's gold coins were all from the system loan. After paying off the loan, what was left was only a small portion. Although this small portion was an astronomical number for normal players, it was not much for the Black Dragon King. After all, the Black Dragon King had a guild with several 100,000 players in the Japanese server. This was a real estate that was only slightly smaller than Unhindered. In other places, it was an unparalleled existence. Naturally, its value was immeasurable. Whether it was money or priceless real estate, a shrewd businessman like the Black Dragon King knew better than anyone else. Even if he was unwilling, the Black Dragon King quickly made a decision. After hesitating for a moment, the arrogant Black Dragon King finally gave up and sighed helplessly. "Fine, I lose. I'll give you the money, but you have to ensure that we return home safely." The Black Dragon King had no other choice. He was in despair. He could not win, and someone had dug a hole for him. What else could he do but admit defeat? The Black Dragon King's only wish was to return home safely. "No problem," Wuji said calmly. "Although the Chinese players are vengeful, they are more forgiving than you think. As long as you hand over the mine and disband the guild, no one will care about you. Is that so? The Black Dragon King was doubtful. They won't hunt me down? Don't worry. Wuji smiled and said, as long as I don't say it, no one will know your names. The Black Dragon King was speechless again. The meaning behind Wuji's words was clearly a threat to the Black Dragon King. As long as you don't behave, I'll announce your name to the world. After fighting with Wuji so many times, the Black Dragon King had a considerable understanding of Wuji. He knew that this kid was extremely sinister. With Wuji's character, he would definitely not have any psychological burden doing this kind of thing. When one was under someone else's roof, one had no choice but to lower one's head. Moreover, the Black Dragon King was under the roof of his enemy. Left with no choice, the Black Dragon King painfully handed all the liquidated damages in his hand to Wang Yu, who was next to Wuji. The Black Dragon King was so smart that he naturally knew who to give the money to in order to leave safely. Watching Wang Yu take away the jewel chest, the Black Dragon King's heart was broken. He could finally see that he did nothing else after coming to the national server, but became the god of wealth passing by. The world's largest guild was thrown away after 2 hours in his hands. The liquidated damages were even more pitiful. It was wiped out before it could even warm up. What the hell, why did he come all the way here? To be a transport leader? The Black Dragon King wanted to cry but had no tears. Just as Wuji expected, the players on the national server were very tolerant. Now that the mine had been snatched back, and the Dark Alliance had also announced its disbandment, the players did not beat up this group of Japanese who were in a sorry state and whose names were unknown. After receiving the gold coins from the Black Dragon King, Wang Yu also released his authority. The Black Dragon King listlessly led his subordinates home. After the Black Dragon King left, Wang Yu subconsciously opened the jewel chest and looked at the value of the gold coins. F***CK. Seeing the string of zeros behind the value of the gold coins, even a calm expert like Wang Yu could not help but shout, 200 million gold coins. 200 million, damn it. This group of people from Chuanjin are considered the richest people in the game, but the largest value they have ever had was only in the millions. The combined assets of the dozen or so people from Chuanjin were only in the tens of millions. To think that there were 200 million gold coins in this jewel chest. So the liquidated damages of this group of mining players were 20,000 gold coins. It was no wonder that these people did not withdraw from the Dark Alliance a second time after knowing that it was established by the Japanese. 20,000 gold coins converted to almost 200,000 RMB was their hard-earned money for over 2 months. If the mine had not been snatched away, these mining players would not have withdrawn so easily. What's the matter? Is there a divine weapon in there? What's the fuss? Seeing Wang Yu in this state, the people from Chuanjin could not help but crowd around and stretch their necks to look into the jewel chest curiously. However, the jewel chest was in Wang Yu's hands, and the others could not see what was inside. It's money. Wang Yu composed himself and said, F***CK. Have you never seen money before? The group looked at him in disdain. 200 million. Before the people from Chuanjin could finish their words, Wang Yu added. Then, Wang Yu activated his authority. Sigma, mouth? What? Seeing the number of gold coins in the jewel chest, the people from Chuanjin were dumbfounded. To place one's pride and Mingdu, the two good-for-nothings, were even drooling. Chun Xiang was so shocked that he muttered to himself, 200 million? We're going to be rich. Even Wuji could not help but reveal a shocked expression when he saw the number of gold coins. At the same time, Wuji felt a sense of admiration for the Black Dragon King. 200 million gold coins was taken out just like that. An average gaming geek would not have such courage. This old fox was really someone who could do great things. Look at all of you who have never seen the world. When evildoers run wild saw that a mere 200 million gold coins, I feel like my ego is inflating as well. could scare the people from Chuanjian so much, he could not help but roll his eyes. Have you ever seen 200 million gold coins? When the idiot to place one's pride heard this, he retorted in disdain without even thinking about it. When they heard to place one's pride's words, the people from Chuanjian cast a glance at to place one's pride and quickly took a few steps back. To place one's pride had a look of disdain on their faces. Damn it, am I wrong? To place one's pride flew into a rage. My friend, Evildoers Run Wild said earnestly, in a sense, this 200 million is what I gave to the Black Dragon King, and the Black Dragon King gave it to my brother. Tell me, have I ever seen 200 million gold coins before? To place one's pride's face turned red, and he quietly retreated to the side. Chapter 1656. Tisk tsk tsk. As soon as Evildoers Run Wild said that, the Chuanjian people couldn't help but sigh. Look at how the boss is. He's always thinking about his brothers in the guild. Wuji, old dog, don't you have anything to say? Who do these 200 million gold coins belong to? Wuji rubbed his chin and asked Evildoers Run Wild. Yours. Evildoers Run Wild waved his hand casually. It seemed that this god of fortune was indeed not interested in these gold coins. Wrong. Wuji corrected him. These bastards said that I'm not thinking about them. Now, I announce that these 200 million gold coins will be split between me and Old Cow. F***ck. Hearing Wuji's words, the Chuanjian dogs jumped up. To place one's pride, and the other elders pointed at the others and shouted in unison, Grandpa Wuji, even if you don't think about your brothers, you have to think about your grandson. Speaking up to this point, these beasts even pointed at themselves. F***ck. Seeing this group of shameless fellows, the rest of the Chuanjian people broke down. Wang Yu also shook his head speechlessly. They could be obscene if they were rich, and they could be subdued if they were mighty. This was the basic behavior of these guys in Chuanjian. After all, they were newbies. Compared to these old dogs in Chuanjian, they still had a limit. Big Brother Wuji. Just as the Chuanjian people were making a ruckus, Evildoers Run Wild frowned and said, I can give you the money, but you have to get the mine back. To move unhindered, the mine was the foundation of the guild. Without the mine, there would be no income. No matter how much the millions of brothers under Evildoers Run Wild believed in Evildoers Run Wild, it would be a waste if they didn't have the mine. Evildoers Run Wild couldn't possibly lead so many people to starve. As for snatching back the mines, the thought had crossed Evildoers Run Wild's mind. However, Evildoers Run Wild had personally witnessed the strength of the various large guilds when it came to snatching mines. To move unhindered was unlikely to win in an all-out war. To move unhindered, Evildoers Run Wild had just experienced a disaster. It was unrealistic to snatch back the mines they had lost as soon as possible. If possible, Evildoers Run Wild hoped to resolve the matter peacefully. Even if they had to spend a little more money, it would be fine. Don't worry. Wuji patted Evildoers Run Wild's shoulder and comforted him. These guys will never be united. You don't want to use force, but they're more afraid of trouble. Besides, I've promised to forge equipment for them. Let's wait. It won't be long before they send the mine back. As expected, just as Wuji finished speaking, he received a message from his friends list. It wasn't anyone else but Blood Red War Flag. Blood Red War Flag supported Chuanjian in this operation and received special care from Wuji. So, when Chuanjian got rich, Blood Red War Flag also benefited a lot. Chapter 1657. Forget it. Wang Yu waved his hand and said, I know how to rob. This kind of petty thievery is not suitable for me. Hearing the conversation between Wang Yu and Wang Yu, the others were speechless. Good heavens, one thievery and the other robbing, these two were not ordinary people. Tsk. Old Wang could not help but pout at Wang Yu's choice of words. I hate robbers like you the most. You have no skills at all. I'm leaving, Don't look for me if there's nothing, and don't look for me if there's something. After giving Wang Yu a disdainful look, old Wang called out to the rest of Chuanjin and stepped into the teleportation portal. With a flash of white light, he disappeared from everyone's sight. He came in a hurry and left in a hurry. The world was big, and old Wang was indeed a man who moved like the wind. Seeing old Wang leave, To Place One's Pride seemed to have thought of something and shouted anxiously, "Uncle Nyo, that skill is a grandmaster of combat skill, right? If you don't want to learn it, I'll learn it, learn it?" Wang Yu glanced at To Place One's Pride and said, "Do you think that his skill can be learned easily?" To Place One's Pride heard this and immediately shut his mouth. No one knew their father better than their son. Out of everyone present, no one understood Wang Yu better than Wang Yu. Learning a skill in the game did not take up much time, so why did Wang Yu choose not to learn it? It must be because learning old Wang's skill was not free. To Place One's Pride did not know how much it would cost, but To Place One's Pride knew that Wang Yu was not a stingy person. If even he did not dare to learn it, the price would definitely not be low. Wang Yu was old Wang's biological son, so it was impossible for others to have more influence than Wang Yu. After all, the skill's name suggested that it was a very powerful skill. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to steal from Wang Yu without being discovered. There was no free lunch, dinner, or supper in this world. To Place One's Pride would not be able to learn it for free. Just as Lao Wang left, the transmission array released a dazzling light. When the light dissipated, the blood-colored flag led a travel-worn young man out of the transmission array. When Blood Red War Flag had sent a message to Wuji had given Blood Red War Flag 2 teleportation right. He had not expected this kid to find the blueprint so quickly. Seeing that only Chuanjin's group was in the encampment, Blood Red War Flag was a little surprised. Am I the first to arrive? Creating a divine weapon was a very precious opportunity for anyone. As the saying went, first come, first serve. Blood Red War Flag thought it would not be able to get in the queue. Of course, Wuji said calmly, not every guild boss trusts us like you do. Haha, Boss Wuji is right. Blood Red War Flag was stunned for a moment before a joyful expression appeared on its face. Wuji's EQ had never been low. When he wanted to speak nicely, he was very good at winning people's hearts. With a casual sentence, he had explained the problem and made Blood Red War Flag feel that they agreed with him. As a non-combat profession, this kid was the boss of this group of experts in Chuanjin. It seemed like there was a reason why he could be the boss. Alright, stop talking nonsense. Who is the Grandmaster Blacksmith? Just as Wuji and Blood Red War Flag were chatting happily, the young man behind Blood Red War Flag could not wait any longer and spoke impatiently. Young master, this is not your home. Don't speak like this. When the young man spoke, Blood Red War Flag, who was in a good mood, turned pale. It hurriedly turned around and covered the young man's mouth. When everyone in Chuanjin saw this, they could not help but raise their eyebrows. Their gazes were attracted to the young man. The young man was in his 20s. He had a medium build and was quite handsome. However, he had an unruly look on his face. He had the demeanor of To Place One's Pride when he was young. Seeing the young man's appearance, everyone from Chuanjin's sect revealed a strange smile at the same time. Well, he actually dared to make a fuss in Chuanjin's territory. He even dared to forcibly interrupt old dog Wuji's words. It seemed that this kid was not a veteran player of Blood Red War Flag. Moreover, Blood Red War Flag did not teach him well before he came. What are you doing? The young man did not seem to be afraid of Blood Red War Flag at all. He then slapped Blood Red War Flag's hand to the side and shouted, "This is Yu Huiqing. I can speak however I want." It's precisely because this is Yu Huiqing that you can't speak like that, Blood Red War Flag said with sweat dripping down his forehead. Hee. Young people are very energetic. Wuji had always been expressionless towards outsiders. The young man's sudden interruption did not make Wuji angry. Instead, he raised his chin and asked, My name is Thousand Miles, I am the guild leader of Blood Alliance. Just as Blood Red War Flag was about to speak, the young man interrupted Blood Red War Flag and introduced himself. Guild leader? Hearing Thousand Miles' self-introduction, everyone in Chuanjin could not help but look at Blood Red War Flag. Wasn't Blood Red War Flag the guild leader of Blood Alliance? When did this Crimson Thousand Miles appear? They had never heard of him. Could it be that Blood Alliance also had internal strife? Thinking of this, evildoers Run Wild empathized with them. His face was full of sympathy. They were all in the same boat, vice. Blood Red War Flag explained awkwardly. My dad said that I'll be the main one soon. Thousand Miles added without giving them any face. Your dad lied to you. You'll have to leave after 2 days. Blood Red War Flag did not back down. What a mess! What's going on? Wuji and the others almost burst out laughing. Wang Yu was the kinder one, so he sent a private message to Blood Red War Flag. Our boss's son. He just finished his college entrance exams and came to play for a few days. Blood Red War Flag explained gloomily. They had no choice. Even though Blood Red War Flag had over 10,000 subordinates, they were just workers. Their status was not even as high as the Grim Reaper's left hand. In front of the boss who sponsored them, they were not even worth mentioning. The fact that the boss did not make his own son the guild leader was already giving Blood Red War Flag a lot of face. College entrance exams? How old is this person? Hearing Blood Red War Flag's explanation, Wang Yu was dumbfounded. This kid was so mature that he did not look like a high school student. Could it be that his name was Fan Jin? He's a teacher. Blood Red War Flag wiped his sweat. I see. Wang Yu nodded thoughtfully. At this time, Thousand Miles said to Wuji, Your guild's base isn't good. It's much smaller than our Blood Alliance. It can't be helped. Our Chuanjin only has a few dozen people. We can't compare to your Blood Alliance. Wuji said humbly. That's true. Thousand Miles nodded. However, your guild isn't simple either. I heard that 2 master blacksmiths are in your guild. You flatter me, Wuji said. I was just lucky. Even if they were from the same guild, there was no need for them to be friends with each other. Moreover, from another perspective, Blood Red Miles was also Blood Red War Flag's opponent. After this kid came to the guild, he obviously didn't care about him, the guild leader. Now that Wuji was helping him take down Thousand Miles, it wasn't a bad thing for Blood Red War Flag. How can you say that? Thousand Miles wasn't stupid. Of course, he could tell that Wuji was lying. Hearing Wuji's strange tone, Thousand Miles immediately became angry. It seems like young Master Thousand Miles can't take out the materials. Wuji smiled and pointed at Thousand Miles. He said to the Chuanjin players, See that? He's so poor, but he still dares to act rich. At this point, Wuji shook his head and sighed. He put on an expression of sorrow for his misfortune and anger at his incompetence. Ha! Seeing Wuji's expression, the Chuanjin players didn't hold back and laughed. Even Blood Red War Flag couldn't help but laugh. Damn, this Wuji really knew how to make fun of people. At the end of the day, Thousand Miles Crimson was still a child. How could he be a match for an old dog like Wuji when it came to talking? He just wanted to show off his wealth, but he ended up being led into a ditch by Wuji. Who said that? Thousand Miles panicked when he heard others say that he was poor. He explained with a red face, Our Blood Alliance has money. It's just materials. War Flag, give it to him. As he said this, Thousand Miles waved at Blood Red War Flag like he was calling a lackey. F***CK. Seeing this, Blood Red War Flag, who was watching the show, curled his lip. Damn, this kid was showing off his wealth, asking me to pay for it. Although Blood Alliance had a lot of assets and didn't lack materials, This was the hard-earned money of their brothers. How could they let this prodigal kid waste it? Especially when his neighbor was an evil person like Chuanjin. If they didn't make things difficult for him, Blood Alliance's assets would be ruined by him in no time. Thinking of this, Blood Red War Flag said awkwardly, "I don't care about the materials. Ask for it from the warehouse manager. Look for Blood Shura." "You." I'll look for it." Seeing that Blood Red War Flag wasn't listening to him, 1,000 Miles snorted. He opened his friends list and found Blood Shura. Although epic equipment didn't require as many materials as legendary equipment, it still required a lot of materials. The materials for Rebirth had been monopolized by reigning the world for a long time, so the other guilds did not have much in store. Blood Alliance definitely had the materials, but Blood Azura told 1,000 Miles in a serious tone that these materials were for professional teams to use, and without the boss's approval, they could not use them. In Blood Alliance, even Blood Red War Flag had to give 1,000 Miles some respect. This time, the epic equipment was definitely for 1,000 Miles. Even if he was the boss son, he couldn't use the materials. "You're all against me." Seeing that Blood Shura wasn't giving him the materials, 1,000 Miles became anxious. He pointed at Blood Red War Flag and said, "Do you think I don't have a way? I'll buy them myself, okay? Just you wait." As he said this, 1,000 Miles went out to buy the materials. "Damn it! Where are you going to buy them?" At this moment, the monster Heng Xing called out to the Crimson 1,000 Miles. "What? I can't buy the materials outside of here?" 1,000 Miles said unhappily. Evildoers Run Wild smiled and said, "I'm not sure if you can buy the materials outside of here. Without me, you definitely wouldn't have been able to buy them." "What a joke. Who do you think you are?" 1,000 Miles said with disdain. "Oh, by hi. Blood Red War Flag didn't like this guy. Couldn't young people be more polite? Why did he attack everyone he saw? Wuji hadn't even calmed down yet, and this guy had offended Evildoers Run Wild. He's Evildoers Run Wild." Blood Red War Flag quickly said, "All the materials in Rebirth belong to him." "What?" Hearing Blood Red War Flag say this, 1,000 Miles' face turned pale. He looked at Evildoers Run Wild in surprise, then looked at Wang Yu, who looked exactly like Evildoers Run Wild, and said, "This Evildoers Run Wild is also a member of their guild?" "No." Blood Red War Flag thought for a moment and said seriously, "In theory, Evildoers Run Wild is just a little brother here." Chapter 1659. Little brother? Hearing Blood Red War Flag's words, 1,000 Miles' eyeballs almost popped out of their socket. Since Crimson 1,000 Miles didn't even know who the real boss of Yuhui City was, it was obvious that he didn't know much about the current powers in the game. However, Crimson 1,000 Miles had heard of Rampaging Demons, a guild that covered the entire game. However, such a strong player was just a little brother in front of Chuanjin. This was unbelievable. If he didn't know that Blood Red War Flag wouldn't lie to him, he wouldn't have believed such nonsense even if he was beaten to death. "It's true," Blood Red War Flag added. "The reason why Chuanjin agreed to forge equipment for us is because they want to help us move unhindered back to the mines." To move unhindered? Blood-colored Miles might be young, but he was no fool. After hearing Blood-colored War Flag's words, Blood-colored Miles immediately calmed down. The way he looked at the people from the Quanjin sect also became respectful. To move unhindered had suffered an unprecedented blow, but to move unhindered to regroup. To move unhindered in the game, someone who could clean up the mess was not someone to be trifled with. To be able to do this, one could see the breadth of their influence. However, when he thought about it, it made sense. Everyone knew that there were only 2 Grandmaster Blacksmiths in the entire Rebirth server. These 2 Grandmaster Blacksmiths were both from the Quanjin sect. The Quanjin sect could be considered to have monopolized the market for divine weapons in the game. Such a guild could be said to be an arms supplier in the game. What was the most important thing in the game? Equipment. Which guild would be foolish enough to offend an arms supplier? It was not surprising that they had such prestige. Of course, 1,000 Miles's thoughts were not wrong, but he clearly did not understand what Blood Red War Flag was trying to express. However, Blood Red War Flag had achieved its goal of getting 1,000 Miles to behave. Thinking about this, 1,000 Miles became much more low-key. With a smile on his face, he walked in front of Evildoers Run Wild, showed the attributes of the blueprint, and asked Evildoers Run Wild, "Boss, how much are the materials?" Evildoers Run Wild glanced at the list of materials on the blueprint and said, 500,000 gold. 500,000? Blood-colored 1,000 Miles glared at him and said, "Why don't you just rob them?" Evildoers Run Wild was a true big shot in the game. Even his father, 1,000 Miles Bloody, had to be courteous to Evildoers Run Wild, let alone 1,000 Miles Bloody. Naturally, 1,000 Miles Bloody wouldn't spoil 1,000 Miles Bloody. He replied, "Do you know how to talk, young man? This is a serious business. If you want to buy it, then buy it. If you don't want to buy it, then get lost. Why are you pretending when you can't afford it?" Me. Not only that, but even if Wang Yu drew blueprints or researched nuclear reactors, Wang Yu wouldn't be as professional as Chun Xiang or Bao San. Chopper 345 placed the blueprint on the workbench and threw the materials into the furnace. After the materials were melted, they were poured into the mold. After forging, the components of the Sunset Star's bow were completed. The next step was to skillfully string and assemble the bow. Although the shape of the bow was different, it was still the same. Chopper had assembled tens of thousands of bows, and at this moment, it was like moving clouds and flowing water, dazzling everyone's eyes. Clang! Following the sound of a successful crafting notification, a longbow appeared in Chopper 345's hands. Chopper 345 opened the equipment display. Sunset Stars, longbow, epic, unnamed, attack, magic. I won't write down the specific attributes since they aren't important. Hiss, before even seeing Zhang Gong's attributes, 1,000 Miles Crimson couldn't help but gape at the name. On the other hand, Chopper stood calmly at the side with an enigmatic smile on his face. Chapter 1660. In Rebirth, the equipment created by players was also divided into different grades. Generally, equipment with low attributes that did not reach the upper limit of the main attribute would be called substandard. For example, a level 20 legendary weapon with an upper limit of 200 attributes would be called substandard if it only had 100 attribute. If it could reach the upper limit of the grade, it would be called a finished product. If one of the attributes was maxed out, which was 200 to 200, the equipment would be called a small top-grade item. If the main attributes were all maxed out, it would be called a top-grade item. If the equipment had the word unnamed, it would be the best of the best. This was because, apart from maxing out the main attributes, the equipment would also have an additional attribute based on the name of the player. Although most of the additional attributes were of little value, the significance of an unnamed equipment was not only the level of the attributes, but also the system's recognition of the player's subprofession. Since the start of Rebirth, the number of unnamed equipment did not exceed a single digit. Every single one of them was the work of a master, and every single one of them was bought by the creator for a high price. To them, this was an honor. Even Wang Yu, who was known as the god of craftsmen and had created numerous godly equipment, had never created an unnamed equipment. From this, one could see how perfect this equipment was. Originally, 1,000 Miles was still brooding over the additional 500,000 gold coins he had spent, but when he saw the word unnamed on the equipment, he immediately felt relieved. There was indeed no such thing as a waste of money in this world. "Little Chopper, aren't you going to buy it?" When Wuji saw that 1,000 Miles Crimson had obtained such a good piece of equipment, he intentionally walked over to Chopper's side and egged him on. "There's no need." Chopper waved his hand and said solemnly, "This might be an honor for other blacksmiths, but for me, It's just a learning experience. Everyone has their own goals, and we shouldn't be obsessed with past glory. Damn. Are you serious? Little Chopper's dignified explanation left all the Chuanjian dogs speechless. They didn't expect that other than Wang Yu, there was another person in Chuanjian who was in the intermediate realm. Chopper blushed and said embarrassedly, "It's mainly because I can't afford it." Everyone in Chuanjian. Just as Wuji was about to say that he had money, 1,000 Miles of Crimson yelled, "I won't sell it even if I can afford it. An outstanding blacksmith like you shouldn't be cooped up in a place like this." This kind of place? When the members of the Chuanjian sect heard this, their expressions darkened. It looked like this little bastard had not been taught enough. Seeing the expressions of the Quan Zhen players, Blood Red War Flag quickly changed the topic. 1,000 Miles, hurry up and name the equipment. Oh, Crimson Mile responded and quickly filled in the blank space with the word, setting sun. After he clicked confirm, the two words turned into a ray of light and attached to the bow, turning into two Chinese characters that were engraved on the side of the bow. At the same time, there were two lines of words at the bottom of the bow. Builder. Chopper 345 Sunset, Namer, 1,000 Miles of Blood Active Skill. Fires an arrow that shines like the sun. Deals 120% physical damage to the target and has a 3-second blind effect. Cooldown, 60 seconds. MP cost, 10%. Builder was a symbol that every player had when they created equipment. Sunset was a skill that was created based on the name of 1,000 Miles of Blood. Although the skill's damage wasn't high, the MP cost was very high. However, it had a blind effect. This skill was quite good for archers who lacked crowd control skills. After 1,000 Miles of Blood received this bow, his mouth hadn't closed at all. Fortunately, this game was quite realistic. Otherwise, his mouth would have stretched all the way to the back of his head. Looking at Crimson 1,000 Miles' proud expression, Wuji and the rest could not help but curse in their hearts. Damn it, such a waste of such a good item. Casting pearls before swine, we have to find an opportunity to snatch it back. Just as 1,000 Miles of Blood was feeling excited, a system announcement rang out. Announcement. Chuanjian player Chopper 345 has successfully created a godly weapon, Sunset Stars, for Blood Alliance player 1,000 Miles of Blood. His glorious deeds will forever be recorded in the history of Sunset Stars. 1,000 Miles of Blood clicked show when the system asked if he wanted to show off his weapon. Wasn't the purpose of playing a game to show off equipment? 1,000 Miles of Blood's actions were normal. However, when the stats of the Sunset Stars were announced, it caused a commotion among the major guilds. These major guilds naturally knew that Chuanjian had used a chance to create equipment in exchange for a mine. However, this was a bit of a fantasy to most people. After all, godly weapons were very distant existences to most people. This was the same for the players of these major guilds. Because of this, other than Chuanjian's old friend from the Blood Alliance, no one else took the initiative to stand out. They didn't expect Chuanjian to keep their promise and really create a godly weapon. Moreover, it was a godly weapon with full stats and an unnamed name. Everyone knew that compared to the equipment rewarded in the game, the equipment created by players had much better stat. This was because players could create a finished product most of the time. However, the stats of the equipment rewarded by the system depended on luck. At the current stage of the game, an epic equipment rewarded by the system was worth 300,000 gold coins. Although there wasn't any artificially created epic equipment, one could imagine that it would only be worth more than that. As for the value of the mine in the hands of the major guilds, the Dark Alliance had already stated that it was only 500,000 gold coins. At this moment, everyone was using a hot potato to exchange for a priceless piece of epic equipment. No matter how they looked at it, it wasn't a loss. Hee. Wuji had long since expected the system announcement. Wuji was well aware of the intentions of the major guilds. Seeing the announcement in the sky, Wuji chuckled. Do you see that? This is the system's advertisement for us. Before tonight, all of your minds will be taken back. As expected, not long after Wuji finished speaking, Wuji and Thousand Miles of Blood's message boards were flooded with messages. If it wasn't for the fact that Chopper 345 had set up a system to reject all messages from strangers, he might have been the one to suffer the most. Those who contacted Wuji were naturally asking about the process and what they needed to bring to create the equipment. On the other hand, those who contacted Thousand Miles of Blood were people who thought they were smart. They wanted to know what Thousand Miles of Blood was going to bring so that Wuji wouldn't be able to scam them again. Wuji's reply was simple: just bring the blueprints. Thousand Miles of Blood's reply was based on his experience: bring the blueprints and materials. If you don't have the materials, you can buy them here. Of course, he could see the emotions of the people around him. However, as a perfectionist, Uncrying Reaper sighed and walked to the side. While Uncrying Reaper was gloomy, Chopper 345 finished forging his second piece of equipment. When the equipment's attributes were displayed, the owner of the equipment gasped in surprise. Uncrying Reaper was taken aback. He quickly opened the second piece of equipment that Chopper had forged. It was an unnamed piece of equipment. Hiss! The surrounding onlookers sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw this. Although they weren't blacksmiths, they had heard of the probability of obtaining unnamed equipment. There were more than 10 million blacksmiths in the game, but there were less than 10 unnamed pieces of equipment in the 6 months since the game's launch. The probability was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. However, in less than half an hour, Chopper had forged 2 unnamed pieces of equipment. Such a strange thing was simply unheard of. Originally, Uncrying Reaper comforted himself with the probability. However, when he saw Chopper forge another unnamed piece of equipment, he was depressed. F*CK, 2 of the 3 pieces of equipment were unnamed. Why did he miss out on it? Just as Uncrying Reaper was in a dilemma, someone suddenly walked up to the person who obtained the unnamed equipment. I think I saw that apart from the blueprints, you also gave something to the blacksmith. Nonsense. That person curled his lip. How can a blacksmith forge without materials? Hearing that person's words, Uncrying Reaper was dumbfounded. Materials? Isn't it provided by Chuanjin? That's right. Hearing this, the others frowned and asked. Before they came, they had consulted Wuji multiple times. I don't know. That person also looked at the Crimson Thousand Miles not far away with a blank expression. That brother from the Blood Alliance told me that I have to bring my own materials. Oh, hearing that person's words, everyone became silent. At this moment, someone in the crowd mumbled, "It can't be such a coincidence, right? The people who brought their own materials all forged unnamed equipment." The speaker had an ulterior motive, and the listener had an ulterior motive. Hearing this, everyone's heart couldn't help but tighten. Wasn't that right? How could there be such a coincidence in this world? The probability of forging unnamed equipment was so low. Forging 1 piece could be considered a coincidence, but forging 2 pieces consecutively, and these 2 pieces were made with their own materials. If this was a coincidence, then it was really a coincidence. It was obvious that the problem was with the materials. The players of the big guilds, especially the guild leaders, were mostly people who cared about appearances. If they wanted to show off, they would show off. For the guild leaders of these big guilds, holding a handmade, unnamed sword in their hands was no different from carrying a limited edition bag. Although the materials needed for epic equipment were rare, as the leaders of the big guilds, these materials were not a problem. Everyone had already taken out something as expensive as the blueprints, so they didn't mind spending tens of thousands of gold to buy materials. After all, being able to carry an unnamed equipment on the streets wasn't just a symbol of strength, it also represented a special honor. To be able to spend tens of thousands of gold to get a limited edition godly equipment to attract attention, most players were very happy. As a result, the players who didn't bring materials all spent money to buy materials from evildoers run wild. This sudden turn of events caught the group from the Quan Jin sect and the Monster Rampage sect off guard. As people in the know, Chuanjin knew that this was a coincidence. Seeing everyone buy materials in such a superstitious manner, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. What the hell was going on? This time, Chuanjin had evildoers run wild as a sponsor, and they were very sincere in providing materials to forge equipment for free, but these big guild players didn't appreciate it at all, and instead spent their own money to buy materials. Sigh, in this society, was it so hard to do a good deed sincerely? Chapter 1662. In fact, people who were slightly more rational knew that it was a matter of probability, but most people were still willing to gamble. Of course, Chopper didn't disappoint them. After more than 2 hours of continuous forging, he had forged a total of 97 pieces of epic equipment. Among them, there were 16 pieces of top-grade equipment, 73 pieces of top-grade equipment, and as many as 8 pieces of unnamed equipment. With the 3 pieces of equipment that he had forged previously, Chopper had increased the success rate of forging unnamed equipment to 10%. Such a frightening number was simply unheard of. Chopper 345's name, along with the continuous system announcements, became a hot topic in the game. After all, godly equipment was so far away from the players in Rebirth. However, in just 2 hours, this guy called Chopper had actually forged 100 pieces of epic equipment. This could be called a godly equipment assembly line. Such a high production efficiency was unheard of in the history of the game. Not only that, but Chuanjin also became famous. Chuanjin hadn't been quiet since the start of the game. Old players knew that this was a group of roving bandits, and new players also knew that this was a small guild with less than 20 people, 1/3 of which were non-combatants. However, it was this small guild that refreshed everyone's understanding of the game time and time again. With just 8 people, they were the first to take down the guild base. They were the exclusive supplier of high-level potions in the game. With just 1 person, they resisted the encirclement of players from 100 cities and won. This made Yuhuiqing the first neutral main city since the start of Rebirth. They were also the first to open up the sea route and start a war, seizing 1/3 of Yingzhou Island. The most inconceivable thing was that this group of guys, as a grassroots team, used the attitude of a dark horse to suppress the 9 Regions team and win the championship of the National League. Any one of these achievements would be incredible to ordinary people, but all of them appeared in the hands of a small guild with only a dozen people. Such a guild could only be described as a miracle. And now, a blacksmith who forged 100 pieces of godly equipment in 2 hours appeared in Chuanjin, setting an epic record. The players in a Rebirth were already numb to the Quan Jin sect. As for the guild leaders who had gathered in Chuanjin's residence to watch Chopper forge, they were even more excited. As they watched Chopper forge, they revealed expressions of eagerness. Fortunately, the leaders of these large guilds weren't inexperienced brats like Thousand Miles Crimson. They had all heard of the Quan Jin sect's evil reputation. If not for the fact that they were afraid of the Quan Jin sect, they would have already started poaching the Quan Jin sect's members. After being mocked by a kid like Thousand Miles Bloodred, one could imagine how he felt. He almost cursed out loud. But so what? Blood Alliance didn't belong to Blood Red Warflag, and everything Blood Red Warflag owned came from Blood Alliance. Thousand Miles Bloodred was the young master of Blood Alliance, so Blood Red Warflag naturally didn't dare to offend him. Suppressing his anger, Blood Red Warflag said calmly, "No matter what you think, I advise you to leave quickly. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain myself." "What if I don't want to leave?" Thousand Miles Bloodred raised his eyebrows and provoked. "Then don't blame me for being rude." Blood Red Warflag took out his spear and said, "I am the guild leader, and you are the vice leader. If you don't listen to my orders, then you are not following the rules. I have the right to kick you out of the guild. Don't you dare. Hearing Blood Red Warflag's words, 1,000 Miles Blood Red was instantly enraged. He glared at Blood Red Warflag with an unconvinced expression. Of course I dare. Believe it or not, I can stab you to death right now. Saying that, Blood Red Warflag extended his right hand and pressed his spear against 1,000 Miles Blood Red's throat. 1,000 Miles Blood Red was an archer, so of course, he was no match for Blood Red Warflag in close combat. Seeing that Blood Red Warflag was serious, 1,000 Miles Blood Red was terrified. He glared at Blood Red Warflag and said, "Humph, I'll leave then. Just you wait." Chapter 1663. Apart from the players, the game company was the most shocked at this moment. Ever since the creation of online games, there had never been a game that could stay open forever. After all, no matter how novel a game was, there was a limit to its playstyle. There were many more players than the game designer, and no matter how many holes the game designer dug, it would not be able to sustain the development of so many players. Once a game's playstyle was fully developed, it would be the end of the road for the game. Because of this, the game had to be constantly updated in terms of playstyle and expansion packs in order to continue operating for as long as possible. However, the designer's imagination was limited, and it was impossible for him to come up with new ideas every day. Therefore, other than updating the playstyle, the most direct method was to increase the difficulty of the game. As the saying goes, a thin stream flows for a long time. Players only needed a goal when they played the game. As long as there were quests that they could not complete or bosses that they could not kill, then they would continue playing. Of course, there was a way to increase the difficulty of the game. If the monsters were too overpowered, it would definitely affect the experience of the new players. Not only would the old players not be able to stay, but it would also dissuade the new players. Therefore, the gaming company could only tamper with the drop rate. If the drop rate was low, it would give the players a psychological hint that it's not that they can't defeat the boss, it's that they don't have good equipment. This would increase the players' enthusiasm for the game, and it would also allow the players to experience the satisfaction and sense of accomplishment of killing monsters and dropping equipment. Even a slight increase in the status panel would make the players excited. If a game had a high drop rate, the players might be excited at first, but after a while they would get tired of the game. This was why the private servers were fun at first, but the more they played, the more boring it became. The drop rate of equipment was well controlled in Rebirth. The game had been open for 10 months, and the average level of the players was already at level 60. However, the mainstream equipment was gold grade. Dark gold equipment was basically for experts, while epic and legendary equipment were very rare. Most players had only heard of them. Therefore, Rebirth was in a balanced state where every level of player had their own goals. If this continued, the stability of the game would be firmly in the hands of the gaming company. However, the appearance of Chopper 345 broke this balance. In just 2 hours, the number of epic equipment in the game had increased by 100. Seeing this, the staff members almost spat blood on the screen. Even the higher-ups of the gaming company were shocked. Although 100 pieces of epic equipment wasn't a lot when compared to the player base of over 100 million players, the impact it would have was far more than that. Crafting equipment in the game wasn't as slow as it was in real life. In the game, players could craft a piece of equipment in an average of 1 minute. With this kind of crafting speed, Chopper 345 was like an equipment crafting machine. If this continued, the entire game would be thrown into chaos. This behavior was much worse than what Wang Yu had done. Although Wang Yu often fought monsters above his level and occasionally released expansion packs, the number of players in Rebirth who were as strong as Wang Yu could be counted on one hand. Even if Wang Yu released the expansion packs in advance, most players would not be able to access them. At most, the game would not be running according to the game company's budget, but it would not affect the progress of the game. However, Chopper's act of mass-producing artifacts disrupted the rhythm of the game. It could be said that it threatened the lifespan of the game to a certain extent. Just think about it. The game had only been open for less than a year, and everyone had a godly artifact in their hands. Other than private servers, no online gaming company would dare to do something like this. Rebirth was the livelihood of the gaming company. Of course, no one would allow a single player to ruin their livelihood. This matter concerned the survival of the game, and no one dared to be careless. Seeing this situation, the higher-ups of the gaming company immediately held a short meeting. After some discussion, they decided to update the game. At the same time, just as Thousand Miles Crimson left the guild encampment in Chuanjian, the system made an announcement. Emergency announcement. An error has occurred in the game and the game needs to be updated. All players are requested to log out of the game within 30 minutes. If the update causes any inconvenience, please forgive us. If any losses are incurred due to not logging out, the players will be responsible for it. The game company reserves the right to explain the situation. The game announcement was as stiff as ever, and the players were used to it. Although they did not understand why the game would suddenly update, they obediently logged out of the game. After all, the announcement made it very clear that if any losses were incurred, the players would be responsible for it. Moreover, the game company had the right to explain the situation. In other words, if they were to log out late and lose their data, they would not be able to do anything about it. Why is there an update all of a sudden? Who knows? This damned gaming company is always up to no good. The guild leaders in Chuanjian's encampment were all depressed. Everyone was in high spirits, and now, the system had come out to spoil the mood. However, even though they were unhappy, no one dared to go against the system. As such, the players who had already forged their equipment left the encampment in Chuanjian. In just a short while, only the players who had yet to forge their equipment were left in Chuanjian's encampment. It was obvious that there were still 30 minutes before the update, and these players were still waiting for Chopper to forge their equipment. However, when Wuji saw this, he cupped his hands and said, "Everyone, please leave first." Everyone looked at each other, but no one had any intention of leaving. "What's wrong?" Wuji raised his eyebrows and said, "I don't mind if you guys want to lose your data, but Chuanjian only has one encampment. If something happens because of you, I'm afraid I won't be able to explain it to my brothers." After saying that, Wuji turned to look at the members of Chuanjian, and his gaze finally fell on Wang Yu. The meaning behind Wuji's words was obvious. Don't be so shameless. If you don't leave, I'll get someone to make a move. Everyone was shocked when they saw Wang Yu. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Not everyone was fortunate enough to witness Wang Yu's abilities. However, Wang Yu was also very famous. None of the big shots dared to think that they were his match. With so many people watching, not only would they gain nothing from defeating him, but they would also embarrass themselves if they lost. Since Wuji had already asked them to leave, everyone reluctantly left the encampment in Chuanjian. "Let's go." Wang Yu waved goodbye to Song Wuji and the others after seeing the big bosses of the various large guilds leave. She then turned around and was about to log off. Chapter 1664. What's wrong? What's wrong? Hearing that, Wang Yu stopped in his tracks, turned around, and asked in confusion. Wuji just chased him out. Why didn't he let him go offline now? Nonsense. Of course there's something. Wuji said, "Why do you think those bastards didn't want to go offline?" "Why?" Wang Yu was puzzled. Wuji explained, "The game didn't update earlier or later, but at this time. Why do you think it is? Is it because of the equipment forging?" Wang Yu rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. He was still puzzled. Isn't it just 100 pieces of equipment? There are so many people in the game. Is there a need to make such a big fuss? 100 pieces of equipment isn't something to make a fuss about, Wuji said, but 100 pieces of epic equipment suddenly appeared in 2 hours. Don't you think it's a big fuss? This, Wang Yu was speechless. Indeed, epic equipment was rare. Even if Chopper forged one a day, it would attract attention. Not to mention 100 pieces in 2 hours, the onlooker sees the game more clearly. He might not have noticed anything, but to those who didn't know, it was obvious that there was a bug in the system. Even if they knew it wasn't a bug, players would still report it. There were all kinds of people in the game. There were many people who were jealous when they saw others obtaining good equipment. An equipment manufacturing machine like Chopper would definitely affect the harmony of the game. With the aim of making money and players as the core, the game company didn't care who was right or wrong. In any case, if most players felt that something was wrong, the game company would definitely resolve it as soon as possible. What about those who didn't forge any equipment? Wang Yu was an upright person. Even at this time, he was still concerned about other people's problems. It's none of our business. Wu Ji curled his lips and said, "We only promised them to use the mine to exchange for a chance to forge equipment. We didn't promise to forge epic-grade equipment for them. We've already signed the contract. Whether or not they can get good equipment depends on their own fate." At this point, Wu Ji continued, "Didn't you say that you also have a blueprint?" "Ah, yes." Listening to Wu Ji, Wang Yu nodded quickly. "I almost forgot if you didn't mention it." "I knew it." Wu Ji held his forehead and sighed. "Let's hurry up and build it before the game updates. Otherwise, after the game updates, who knows what rules and regulations will be put in place to restrict forging." "Yes. Makes sense." Of course, Wang Yu wasn't the kind of person who wouldn't listen to advice. Although no one knew what the system was going to update, what Wu Ji said was definitely not without reason. Based on the system's nature, if it wanted to restrict forging, it would most likely lower the forging success rate. Even if Chopper was a professional blacksmith in the game world, his professional skills were only auxiliary. The system's words were the most important. If the system said that you couldn't forge a weapon, then no matter how successful you were, it would be useless. Just by hearing the name, one could tell that the God Punisher bow was an amazing artifact. Wang Yu glove could transform into a variety of weapons, except for the bow. If he didn't forge it now, then he wouldn't be so lucky after the update. Thinking of this, Wang Yu nodded and walked into the forging room. The people in Xuanzhen were all people who liked to join in on the fun. Seeing that it was still early, they weren't in a hurry to go offline, so they followed behind Wang Yu and entered the forging room. "Big Bro Iron Ox." Seeing Wang Yu enter, Chopper, who was resting, wiped his sweat and greeted Wang Yu. "Do you have any equipment? Do you want me to forge it for you?" "You rest for a while." Wang Yu waved his hand and said, "I'll forge this equipment myself." There was no such thing as stamina in the game, but forging equipment was a very exhausting job. Especially for Chopper, who was a high-precision blacksmith. Compared to normal blacksmiths who closed their eyes and channeled their energy, Chopper was extremely tired after forging 100 pieces of equipment. As a kung fu master, Wang Yu's research on the human body was comparable to a medical expert. If he didn't rest for a while, Chopper's energy would still be at its peak. But after resting for a while, Chopper's energy was at its lowest. In this state, it would definitely not be easy to forge an exquisite item. Moreover, Wang Yu was a martial artist, so he was very competitive. They were both grandmaster blacksmiths, so of course, Wang Yu was willing to forge his own equipment. Chopper was also a more sensible child. He knew his current state, so he didn't try to be brave. He quietly retreated to the side. Wang Yu took out a blueprint and laid it flat on the workbench. Then, a forging interface appeared in front of Wang Yu. The forging interface showed the names and quantity of materials that needed to be added. Dark iron, gold essence, magic steel, all kinds of incomparably precious materials were thrown into the furnace by Wang Yu as if they were free. Under the high temperature of the fire, all the materials were melted into a furnace of crimson molten iron. The black impurities were also extracted in large amounts. The god-slaying demon-vanquishing bow required very high-purity materials. The materials in Wang Yu's hands were worth millions of gold coins, enough to fill a backpack. However, after removing the impurities, there wasn't much left. In fact, it wasn't even as much as what Chopper had used to forge the dagger. Ding! The large amount of materials was smelted for a full 5 minutes before the smelting was completed. Wang Yu pulled the mold on the workbench to the bottom of the furnace. He gently pulled the handle and carefully poured the crimson molten iron into the mold. After another round of loading, the molten iron gradually solidified into the shape of a bow. According to the system's instructions, Wang Yu took out his forging hammer and started hammering on the bow. Ding ding dang dang! After a series of even and rhythmic tempering, the God Executioner magic bow was finally completed. This time, it was a 2-meter-long giant bow, its entire body made of the rarest and most precious metal. The bow was completely black, and apart from the 4 grooves, there weren't any fancy decorations on it. However, its black appearance gave off an unparalleled sense of firmness and explosive power. Wang Yu casually held the bow in his hand. The moment the heavy longbow entered his hand, Wang Yu felt as if he had become one with it. Holding it in his hand and shaking it a few times, Wang Yu couldn't help but praise. Good bow. Very handy. What about the attributes? Quick, show me the attributes. The Chuanjin members hurriedly urged Wang Yu to show them the weapon's attributes. Attributes my ass. Can't you see that the bow hasn't been strung up yet? This is a half-finished product. Wuji pointed his middle finger at everyone. Not bad. In terms of momentum alone, it was much more powerful than the heavenly tribulations he had encountered before. In the past, the heavenly tribulation would condense a tribulation cloud directly above the target, and a random bolt of tribulation lightning would fall to deal with it. But this time, it was completely different. In the sky above Chuanjin's encampment, black, white, red, and gold clouds surged over from 4 different directions. From the color of the tribulation clouds, it was not difficult to tell that they were attracted by the 4 gems on the bow. Wang Yu had vaguely heard Hermit talk about the origin of these 4 gems once. Although Wang Yu could not remember the details, he had a general understanding of the gems. It was said that these 4 gems were the 4 primordial forces that existed when the reborn world was created. They represented light, darkness, elements, and life respectively. The god-vanquishing bow that Wang Yu had forged used the 4 primordial forces of this world, so it was not surprising that it attracted these terrifying tribulation clouds. While everyone was still in a daze, the 4 different types of tribulation clouds collided. After crashing into each other, the tribulation clouds in the sky began to fuse and condense, finally forming a huge vortex of strange colors. Boom! A bolt of lightning as thick as a water bucket spat out from the vortex and landed on the bow in Wang Yu's hands. Boom! With a loud bang, a golden barrier burst forth from Wang Yu's body. Wang Yu's hair stood on end from the explosion. This weapon's tribulation actually injured a player. Fortunately, Wang Yu had a barrier protecting his body. Otherwise, this lightning bolt would have killed him. Before the barrier could disperse, the second bolt of lightning fell. In the game's setting, divine equipment, especially weapons, had a spirit. Therefore, when the equipment underwent tribulation, the player could not throw it away. Otherwise, there was an 80% chance that the equipment would be destroyed, and the remaining 20% chance that the equipment would reject the player who created it. This bow had cost a lot of money and was painstakingly forged. It was impossible to throw it away, so he could only take it head-on. Wang Yu gritted his teeth, pulled out the red scarf around his neck, and raised the god-vanquishing bow to resist the lightning. Boom! 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 With the protection of the red scarf, Wang Yu had 15 seconds of immortality. Another 3 bolts of lightning fell. Although Wang Yu's health was low, he still stood strong. After 5 bolts of lightning, the vortex in the sky finally stopped spinning and disappeared without a trace. System announcement. Player Iron Ox has forged the legendary divine weapon, the God-vanquishing bow. The system announcement appeared 3 times. However, most of the players in the game had already logged off to wait for the update. Apart from Chuanzhen's group and evildoers run wild, not many people could see the system announcement. However, among these players was 1,000 Miles Crimson, who was about to log off but was attracted by the tribulation clouds in the sky. Legendary divine weapon. God-vanquishing bow? Hiss. Seeing the announcement in the sky, 1,000 Miles Crimson licked his lips and muttered to himself, as expected of a Grandmaster blacksmith. That chopper only forged an epic equipment, but this Iron Ox actually forged a legendary equipment. How can a trash guild like Chuanzhen have the ability to accommodate these two? They're really casting pearls before swine. Sigh. At this point, 1,000 Miles Crimson sighed. Damn it, this blood-red war flag dares to threaten me. I'll teach them a lesson sooner or later. After saying this, 1,000 Miles Crimson glared in the direction of Chuanzhen's encampment, then clicked to exit the game. At the same time, in Chuanzhen's encampment, Wang Yu looked at the giant bow in his hands with a silly smile on his face. This was the first time he had been so happy over a piece of equipment in the game. The most attractive thing in the game was excellent equipment. The most attractive thing was the attributes of equipment, not to mention that this was a divine weapon in front of him. Seeing Wang Yu grinning like an idiot, Chuanzhen's members scratched their ears and cheeks anxiously when they couldn't see the attributes of the equipment. They anxiously shouted, "Damn, old cow, how can you be so kind? What the hell are the attributes of this thing?" Wang Yu and Wuji had been together for a long time, so their two-faced nature had been activated. At this moment, they were smirking as they looked at Chuanzhen's members. They seemed to really enjoy watching these people's impatience. However, seeing that these bastards were so curious, Wang Yu didn't continue to keep them in suspense. He casually opened the equipment display. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.